Chapter 1440. When the old village chief heard this, he was almost sent away. He hurriedly rubbed his eyes and asked again in shock, "How much did you say?" "You didn't hear wrong, 300 hectares. These things were classified, but he had some friendship with these people. In addition, these people were the people Zhang Feng cared about the most, so he couldn't offend them. After all, he had to rely on Zhang Feng for everything he ate and drank. If it weren't for Zhang Feng, he would still be living on that meager amount of food. Because of Zhang Feng's rubber factory and the security fees from the Shaoshan market, Niu Weili had bought 3 properties in the most prosperous area of Chang'an City. This didn't include the land he bought and the 3 big boxes in his house that emitted the smell of copper coins. These were all genuine goods at a fair price, and they were all legitimate income. But just now he didn't know what was wrong with Zhang Feng. He actually asked his wife to tell him to buy land. What kind of logic was this? Although he knew about what happened on the mountain and the phosphate fertilizer, no one had ever used it or seen it before. Even if it had miraculous effects, they should have at least produced it. If you didn't produce it and no one had seen or used it, although Niu Weili believed in it, but he didn't dare to be rash. At this time, Niu Weili's words completely stunned the old village chief and the others. 300 hectares. Not 300 hectares. Was this Feng Zi crazy? He actually bought so much land that no one wanted? The old village chief hurriedly said, "Old Master Niu, you have some friendship with Feng Zi. You must know more about the things in the palace than us. Tell me, what is Feng Zi playing at this time?" Niu Weili smiled bitterly and said, "I don't know about this either. There hasn't been any major events recently, so I don't know. Just now, I heard from Mrs. Zhang that Feng Zi actually asked everyone he knew, including the old soldiers of the peace house, to buy land. I don't know what Feng Zi is thinking, and he even asked me to buy land." Hearing this, the old village chief hurriedly asked, "Then, did you buy it?" Niu Weili didn't want to buy it, but since Zhang Feng said it, he couldn't refuse. Moreover, when did this kid do anything stupid? He naturally had his reasons for getting so many people to buy the land. He nodded and said, "Naturally, I bought a dozen or so mu of land. After all, this official only has this much, and it was accumulated over the years." As for what Niu Weili said after that, only a fool would believe it. The old village chief and the others didn't mind, but they were even more confused. He had no idea what Zhang Feng was up to. So many people came to buy land. What was the meaning of this? Although the old village head didn't know what this meant, he couldn't sit still with so many people buying. He increasingly felt that Zhang Feng was going to do something big. As for what it was, although he wasn't sure, his intuition told him that he still had to buy this land. At this time, Niu Weili no longer had the desire to chat with them. He asked, "What are you doing here?" With this question, the old village chief and the other 2 were pulled back. They hurriedly said, "We are also here to buy land." Niu Weili was stunned. He asked, "Then how much are you planning to buy?" Although he knew that Zhang Feng treated these people very well, how much money could they take out to buy land? How much could they buy? After the old village chief pulled old he and the others aside and muttered for a while, they unanimously decided that it was better to buy less. After all, everyone was buying now. Zhang Feng wouldn't be so bored as to play around with money like this. Therefore, in the end, the old village chief made the decision. He reluctantly took out a dozen silver notes and placed them in front of Niu Weili. "Lord Niu, these are 1,700 taels of silver notes. We'll buy." The instant the banknotes were handed over to Niu Weili, the old village head took back a few more banknotes. After counting exactly 10 banknotes, he painfully handed them over to Niu Weili and said, "Lord Niu, this is what Feng Zi told me to do. Moreover, Feng Zi treats you so well, you have to properly choose some good land for us." The corner of Niu Weili's mouth twitched. There was no need to count the silver notes. He directly took them and stuffed them into his clothes. The silver notes had almost been worn out by the old village chief. There was no need to count them. He took out the account book and flipped through it. "There is a tunnel, but it's a little far. It's outside Tonghua Gate, next to Longzhou Mountain. It's about 1,000 mu. You don't want it? If you want it, I can get it for you." "Yes." When the old village chief heard this, the bitterness on his face instantly turned into joy. That place was a rare piece of fertile land. Although it was a little far, it was next to Longzhou Canal. It was a rare and good place. After the money was settled, the old village chief, Old He, and Zhu Zi's father counted with their fingers and basically bought all the land for everyone in Tonghua Square. Although the money they brought today was far more than this. According to the old village chief's previous thoughts, he wouldn't buy a single word of land. The reason he was willing to pay for these useless things was all because of Zhang Feng. After busying himself for more than 2 hours, Nyo Wei finally sent the old village chief and the others away. Looking at the backs of the three people, Nyo Wei squinted his eyes and looked at the account book. He gritted his teeth and shouted, "Advisor!" After a moment, an old man with a mustache slowly entered the room. Nyo Wei didn't even raise his head as he said, "Quickly bring all the money I have." The advisor was stunned and hurriedly asked, "Master, I want to buy land." Chapter 1441. In fact, Nyo Wei didn't have much money. After cooperating with Zhang Feng, he didn't have much money. Although it wasn't much, it was still an astronomical figure for other county magistrates. At this time he could take out all his money to buy land, which showed that he trusted Zhang Feng. This time he could really make a lot of money. But he didn't know that this was just the beginning. As he made his move, all the people in the county government who could afford to buy land, who could afford it, and who had the money to buy land basically bought land like crazy. In less than a moment, Zhang Shan also hurried to buy land with more than a dozen carriages of copper coins. Such a flashy scene startled the people in Chang'an City. This was not a big deal. Before Zhang Shan's matter was dealt with, people from Qian Tong's mansion also came. This time, Qian Tong's butler was not so old-fashioned. He directly took out a banknote worth 100,000 taels of silver and threw it in front of Niu Jinda. This time, the people in Chang'an City couldn't understand. At first, they thought this matter seemed to be related to the business cooperation between Nyo Wei and Zhang Feng, but they didn't expect that it was not the case at all. Are these people buying land like crazy? Before the crowd could react and understand why these people were buying land so crazily, some of the officials in Chang'an City also came to buy land. It could be said that since Qian Tong's butler left, people had never stopped coming to buy land at the gate of the Chang'an local government. At this time, Nyo Wei also panicked. He hurriedly sent a booklet to the Ministry of Personnel. This time it was better. This booklet appeared in Li Xiaogong's hand. Li Xiaogong was a little confused. Within 2 hours, the whole city of Chang'an was in chaos. Originally, this was a good thing for the imperial court, which was vast and sparsely populated. Moreover, he knew that Fang Xianling had bought a piece of land. Judging from the current situation, Li Xiaogong couldn't help but be a little confused. Could it be that there's something I don't know? Staring at the document in front of him, Li Xiaogong frowned and pondered for about the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Then he waved his sleeve and said, "Butler." A middle-aged man standing outside the door hurried into Li Xiaogong's study. "Master." Li Xiaogong wrote 2 documents and said, "Send this document to White Deer College immediately and hand it over to His Majesty. There must be no mistakes. Also, how much spare money do we have in our residence?" With this question, the housekeeper was a little confused and hurriedly said, "This month's salary hasn't been paid yet. At this time, there are only a little more than 10,000 taels of silver left in the house. In addition to the banknotes and gold leaves in the house, there are about 100,000 taels of silver." Hearing this, Li Xiaogong frowned slightly. Why are there still so many? In his memory there seemed to be more money in the family than this. Seeing this, the butler hurriedly said, "Master, most of the money has been sent to Luozhou Resort, so..." Hearing this, Li Xiaogong suddenly understood. He waved his hand and said, "Let's not worry about this for now. Go and use all the money in the house to buy land. Buy as much as you can. Also, immediately inform Luozhou to do the same. There must be no mistakes." Li Xiaogong had a hunch that this matter seemed to be related to the phosphate fertilizer. And this time, people from the mountain came down to buy land, especially Zhang Feng's 2 womenfolk. There must be a big movement. "Master, how should we reply to the Chang'an local government?" Hearing this, Li Xiaogong frowned and pondered for a moment. Then he said, "Give an order first. This matter is temporarily suspended. If anyone asks, just say that there is no land to sell at the moment." At the same time. At this time the mountain was not peaceful. This was especially true for the people of Tong Huifang. After hearing about this matter from the old village chief, everyone started scheming. On the mountain, more than 3,000 students were sitting in the square excitedly, waiting for Zhang Feng's arrival. On the field, Li Qingqian and the others were already prepared, but Zhang Feng still hadn't arrived. Looking at the long and strange table covered in white cloth, and then looking at the bottles and jars on the table that were transparent like ice, all the students were stupefied. Li Shimin and the others were also surprised at this time. But seeing that Zhang Feng was not coming, they were also a little anxious. Li Shimin looked at the students below the stage and Li Qingqian, who was wearing a mask, and whispered to Wei Zheng, who was next to him, "Old Wei, do you think something will happen at the foot of the mountain?" Wei Zheng was stunned and hurriedly said, Nothing will happen, right? After all this matter. Without waiting for him to finish, Xiao Gizi hurriedly bent over and jumped on the stage. He squatted behind Li Shimin and said with a strange face, "Second master, just now the news from the foot of the mountain said that after Miss Zhang and the others went down the mountain, the whole Chang and city was in an uproar, and many people ran to buy land." Li Shimin heard this and was instantly stunned. He had noticed that something was wrong and had been uneasy. Before he did not know what was going on. Now that Xiao Gizi said this, Li Shimin could not sit still. He suddenly jumped up from the chair and asked, "Did Fengzi really buy the land at the gate of the city?" This. Chapter 1442. Li Shimin seriously doubted whether this Niu Weili would dare to sell that piece of land without using his brain. If he really did sell that piece of land, then there would be a lot of trouble. Just as Li Shimin was letting his imagination run wild, Zhang Feng changed into his iconic white robe and slowly walked over with his hands clasped behind his back. What awaited him was the sound of a tsunami. Seeing this, Li Shimin waved his hand and said, "Quickly send a message to Li Xiaogong and tell him to stop selling the land. As for other matters, wait until I return to the palace to discuss them." As Li Shimin's voice fell, Zhang Feng also slowly walked up to the high platform. At this moment, on the high platform, Ouyang Sun, old elementary scholar Sun Ximiao, Li Gang, and the others sat at the front with the best view. Behind them were Li Shimin, Wei Zhang and the others. Although this kind of arrangement usually didn't happen, it was because of Li Shimin's identity that this was the case. Zhang Feng first greeted everyone and glanced at little Gizi. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes, but in the end he didn't take it seriously. After waving his hand to silence the students, he said, "A few days ago, because of some matters, you all know about your classmate Qian Wanli's matter, right? It was because of this phosphate fertilizer that Qian Wanli fell into the hands of evil people. Because of this, I have decided today to use practical actions to uphold justice for Qian Wanli. Didn't some people spread rumors that our phosphate fertilizer was poisonous? Didn't some people say that there was a problem with our phosphate fertilizer? Then today I won't wear this mask and will do an experiment for everyone. You will be able to learn these things in the future. But there is one point that you must remember clearly, and that is that everything you learn is the foundation of the country. You must be like those birds and know how to reciprocate. Do you all remember?" When the 3,000 plus students heard this, they all bowed and said, "We obey the dean's orders." Hearing this, Zhang Feng gestured with his hands to silence the crowd. He turned to Yu Shernan and the others and said, "Respected teachers, is that kid going to start now?" Yu Shernan nodded and glanced at Li Shimin. Seeing Li Shimin nod without a trace, he said, "Then let's start. But are you sure that this thing is no longer poisonous?" Apart from the more than 3,000 students from Chang and University and White Deer Academy, there were also craftsmen from the various academies present. Most importantly, the emperor was also present. If something went wrong, it would be no laughing matter. Zhang Feng smiled indifferently and said, "The phosphate stone will not poison people in an open and ventilated place. Moreover, with such a small amount, it won't poison people. As for old Nyo and the others, it was because they stayed on the phosphate mine mountain for a night and pulled dozens of wagons over along the way. It would be strange if they were not poisoned. And the poisoning of Li Gan and the others was an accident. Because of the improper experiment, the high-pressure phosphate fertilizer leaked out." Hearing this, everyone was enlightened. Li Shimin pulled off the mask on his mouth and said with a smile, "If that's the case, why should I wear this? Although it's exquisite, it's still a little suffocating." As he spoke, Li Shimin was about to light a cigarette. But, before he could light the cigarette, Zhang Feng hurriedly stopped him. Although the cigarette would not cause any harm, but what if it did? Laoli, at this time we're still fine. This thing is not a joke. I don't know if this fire will cause any other problems. So, after the experiment is over, I'll treat you to a cigarette. How about that? Okay, let's not talk about it. Just watch. As he spoke, Zhang Feng personally walked down from the podium. When Li Qingqian and the others saw this, they hurriedly took out some phosphate ores that they had prepared in advance and put them on the grinder to grind them slowly. When Zhang Feng arrived on the stage, the entire academy was silent. Everyone stared at Zhang Feng's every move with their eyes wide open. They saw Zhang Feng use a small shovel to grind some powder on the grinder and put it in a strange bottle with a big belly. Then he lit an oil lamp under the bottle. Then he put a glass jar over the mouth of the bottle. Not long after, a milky white smoke flowed along the canister and slowly flowed into another large bottle. The large bottle was about half filled with water, and the smoke miraculously flowed along the canister into the bottom of the bottle. Logically speaking, the smoke should be able to float. But the amazing thing was, the smoke not only did not float, but also sank to the bottom of the water. It swirled at the bottom of the water, and some white powder slowly appeared at the bottom of the bottle. Although the test bench was not big, but the people who were not far from the test bench saw it clearly. Only the students who were far away stretched their necks and waited for the test bench. And Li Shimin and the others had never seen such a magical thing. It could actually make the smoke settle in the water. This was amazing enough. After a round of operation, Zhang Feng pointed to the powder at the bottom of the water and said, "Everyone, this is the phosphorus element, which is the material used to make phosphorus fertilizer." Chapter 1443. Zhang Feng's words. Instantly all the students were in an uproar. Even Yu Shernan and the others on the stage along with Sun Simiao, hurried to Zhang Feng's side with their masks. Li Shimin wanted to come, but he was helplessly pressed down on the chair by Niu Jinda. He couldn't get up even if he wanted to. He was so suffocated that his whole face turned red. Li Shimin was cornered. He glared at Niu Jinda and said, "What do you mean by this? Second master, you better bear with it first. I know the power of this thing. It's something that people don't even dare to smell. Fengzi is young. He can withstand it? Then you mean that my body is very weak?" In an instant, Li Shimin's words made Niu Jinda's body tremble. He hurriedly explained, No, I mean, it's..." After hemming and hawing for a long time, Li Shimin was also impatient. He said, "I came here today for this thing. If even I shrink back, won't I become a laughingstock?" Wei Zheng and the others were also frightened by the matter between Niu Jinda and the emperor. However, when he saw that it was because of this matter, Wei Zheng hurriedly went forward to persuade Li Shimin. "Second master, just watch. Don't go forward." Yes, second master. If you go forward, how big of a sin will we be committing?" Li Shimin finally understood. These people had already discussed it. They were afraid that he would do something. They were afraid that something would happen to him. However, if he didn't go today and witness it with his own eyes, he would really be letting his conscience down. "Shut up." Li Shimin's slightly angry roar instantly made several people shut up. Yu Shernan and the others heard it, but they couldn't say anything. After all, this was a matter of the court. What could they say? Moreover, it was the first time they saw this thing. It was also very rare. After all, there were some things that could not be helped. Under Li Shimin's scolding, although Fang Xianling and the others were still somewhat unwilling, they didn't dare to say anything since they were on the mountain after all. They could only make way for Li Shimin. Li Shimin thought about it and put on the mask. In fact, he really didn't want to wear this thing. He always wondered if this thing was a bit inauspicious. However, if he didn't wear it, it would make everyone nag, so Li Shimin still chose to wear it. When the few of them walked onto the stage, the first round of refining had already ended. Zhang Feng was currently sorting out the residue in the equipment and the small amount of phosphate fertilizer that had been refined. The extraction of phosphate fertilizer was actually very simple. It was to add some sodium nitrate, which was also known as lime powder, into the water. Then, the phosphorus element gas, which had been distilled at high temperatures, was introduced into the water. After a chemical reaction, the precipitated phosphate fertilizer, which was also known as phosphorus nitrate. This was also the simplest thing that Zhang Feng could make based on the things of the current era. It was also the most acceptable thing for everyone. Zhang Feng was actually very troubled. These things actually didn't need to be done. However, on one hand he couldn't stand it anymore. On the other hand, he really didn't know about the problem of next year's locust plague. After all, only through this year's planting and irrigation, and by entangling the powder in the water, could a series of obstructions be achieved. Next year's things could possibly eliminate the locusts. But Zhang Feng didn't have the ability to completely eliminate the locusts. At the very least, he had to wait until the hot air balloon was accepted by everyone. Then he could use the hot air balloon to spray pesticides in a large area to possibly stop the locusts. This was only within the territory of the Tang Dynasty. As for the matters outside, Zhang Feng couldn't care so much. But even so, whether the locusts could be stopped by then was another matter. Therefore, on the premise that at least the people in his academy, Lao Li and the others wouldn't starve next year, and on the premise that old Niu accidentally found this thing, Zhang Feng came up with this idea. Otherwise, Zhang Feng really didn't want to do such a troublesome thing. Moreover, it had been leaked out by someone. If he waited until after next year's spring harvest, it didn't matter whether this matter was leaked out or not. However, damn it, he let that old man surnamed Kong come to the mountain and secretly spread the news about the phosphate fertilizer. That was what led to the subsequent matters. Therefore, Zhang Feng was indeed in a bad mood today. The feeling of being made a fool of made him feel very depressed. Therefore, since they were guessing blindly, Lao Tzu would directly lay his cards on the table. Even if their schemes could be deceiving, Lao Tzu wouldn't be afraid. This was where Zhang Feng's confidence came from. Those who believed in him could fill their bellies. Those who didn't believe in him, good luck to them. Li Shimin and the others wandered around the experiment table, and Li Qingqian assumed the role of a guide, loudly introducing the idea of the experiment. And some of the things on the experiment table. Professional terms. For example, the composition of sodium nitrate and so on. Not to mention Yu Shernan and the others who had been studying Zhang Feng's physics teaching book all day long. Even the more than 3,000 students couldn't stay calm when they heard this at this moment. Is this really what we've been learning all this while? Seeing that Zhang Feng didn't speak, a student hurriedly came forward and asked loudly, "Mr. Dean, is this thing called experiment really so magical? Is it that the snow-like thing is the phosphate fertilizer that can greatly increase the yield of grain?" Chapter 1444. Dean, please enlighten us. Everyone heard this. More than 3,000 students started shouting noisily. What a joke. Although this experiment was a piece of cake for Zhang Feng, to the people of this feudal era, this was undoubtedly the first time they had done something like this since the beginning of time. At this time, if they could really come up with something or if they could learn this thing, they would be able to use this skill to secure a position in the Ministry of Works. What was this? This was a benefit that could be seen with one's eyes. Moreover, what they were learning now was the theoretical knowledge of these things. Basically, the entire White Deer College learned a variety of things. For example, ancient Chinese and so on were categorized by Zhang Feng into the Chinese series. The students were very puzzled by this title. However, since the dean said so, what could they do? As for mathematics, it was treated as a serious course. These two classes were taught every day. However, these two classes were more complicated, especially the Chinese series, which included ancient Chinese such as the Book of Songs, Tao Te Ching, and so on. There was also a meditation class on the current situation. There was also a dictation class on the future of the Tang Dynasty and so on. In this dictation class, there were also medical lectures and military sand table lessons. As for the medical course, it was basically Sun Simiao who taught some common medical hygiene, physiological hygiene and so on. There were also some common medical books on the understanding of blood vessels, common treatments for colds and coughs, and some life tips. Although these things seemed extremely simple, after learning them, one would realize that these things were actually too complicated. Not to mention things like aerodynamics, atmospheric pressure, water pressure, and so on. Why could humans float on water? Why was there wind? How was wind formed? And so on. These things undoubtedly revealed the wonders of nature. After seeing the dean and a few senior brothers' personal experiments today, it seemed to have opened a window for these people. Previously, when they saw Zhang Feng's medical lectures and Zhang Feng's treatment of Niu Jinhu's leg, it caused a commotion among the students on the mountain. Many people were completely immersed in medicine. Sun Simiao could not help but be overjoyed. However, this time, the door opened by Zhang Feng made Sun Simiao and the others feel that the world was extremely mysterious. They even unanimously believed that what Zhang Feng said was not true. However, it was not until the last time when the yellow ginger he planted transformed after using phosphate fertilizer that Sun Simiao finally saw Zhang Feng's terrifying talent and the wonders of the technology that Zhang Feng mentioned. Today was also the first time he witnessed such an experiment with his own eyes. Under his eyes, Zhang Feng personally crushed the stone dregs into powder and turned them into wisps of gas through high temperature. Then, through the water at the other end, he turned them into something whiter than snow. That was the phosphate fertilizer last time. Sun Simiao was it? However, after careful observation and testing, Sun Simiao was shocked to discover that this thing was exactly the same as the phosphate fertilizer that Zhang Feng had given him before. That was to say, this thing was undoubtedly phosphate fertilizer? Sun Simiao saw so many people asking at this time and couldn't help but ask, "Fengzi, tell us. Otherwise, old man can be sure that these students will break your door." Zhang Feng sighed and said, "Since Dr. Sun asked me to tell you, I dare not neglect. Since everyone wants to know, then I will tell you my idea today. Do you know why I made the matter of phosphate fertilizer public today? Someone told me that after I got this thing out, I should let the facts speak for themselves. Someone even told me not to spread this thing and keep it as a family heirloom. There are many such things, but..." Zhang Feng looked around and said, "I also thought so." In an instant, everyone burst into laughter. In fact, this idea was the truest. If it were them, they would choose to treat this thing as a family heirloom and pass it down. Zhang Feng shook his head and said, "Wrong. I know that you all want to fight. In fact, I am also a layman. I don't have such high moral integrity, and I have never thought of saving the world. The world has nothing to do with me, Zhang Feng. Yu Shernan couldn't help but frown slightly. The old scholar laughed and said no more. At this time, everyone's expression was different. Some agreed with Zhang Feng's approach and some thought that Zhang Feng might have been provoked. Some even wanted to stop Zhang Feng from continuing. However, Zhang Feng said loudly, "But these are all my previous thoughts. Indeed, we're not saints. To put it bluntly, we're all born and raised by our parents. We're all humans with flesh and blood. As long as we're humans, we're bound to have selfish motives. I, Zhang Feng, am not a saint either. I also have my own selfish motives. My selfish motives are to allow the people I like, the people I care about, the people who care about me, the people who like me, my brothers and family members to live a safe and stable life. That's all. But there is a limit. That is, I can't bear to see others suffer. You are all my students, Zhang Feng. Then we are family. If I, Zhang Feng, can't even fill your stomachs, then I will feel ashamed if you call me a teacher. I will feel ashamed. And you also have family, and your family may be starving at this time. So, I was thinking, since you are all my students, all my family, then why should I be so secretive? In fact, if you have the slightest interest in this thing, you will definitely recognize many things from Li Gan and the others' introduction. That's right. Many of the things in this experiment are things that you have seen in books before. You should be familiar with this thing, right? At this moment, all the students were in an uproar. Immediately, there was a tsunami of cheers. Chapter 1445. Zhang Feng was not wrong. The reason why Zhang Feng chose to make it public was not only to win over the hearts of the people, but also to popularize the phosphate fertilizer as soon as possible. More importantly, it was because of the incident with Chen Wanli. Although many people did not say it out loud, a seed had already been planted in their hearts. What Zhang Feng wanted to do was to take advantage of this opportunity to completely wipe out this seed in the cradle. After all, this thing was a disaster. There was no way to give the students a sense of security in the academy. How could the students completely open their hearts? This operation was effective in an instant. Although Zhang Feng did not know for the time being whether these people really understood and opened their hearts or not, at least at this moment, he could feel that the series of factors caused by Chen Wanli's incident had all disappeared. At this moment, Yu Shernan and the others were also a little shocked. The things that Zhang Feng said were actually recorded in the book. But today, even he could not understand Zhang Feng's words at this time. What on earth did Zhang Feng do, let alone Li Shimin? But at this time, seeing that the students of the academy were so excited, they could not say anything and could only let Zhang Feng fool around. After all, overall, the haze caused by Chen Wanli had disappeared at this time. At this time, Zhang Feng continued, "In fact, what I want to say is that none of us are saints. We just want to use our own strength to make everyone live a better life. We all have families, neighbors, brothers, and friends. When we are full, do we have to watch them starve too? This is not something that we should do. I'll make it clear here first. If anyone dares to do this, no matter what official rank you are, Lao Tzu will find a way to get you down. A person who does not even have the basic filial piety and conscience does not deserve to be an official at all. Although these are two different things, they are actually the same thing. How can a person who does not even have the basic principles of being an official? An official is also a muddle-headed official. Today, this phosphate fertilizer, you all saw it. This is a gift that I, Zhang Feng, want to protect the people I want to protect. I don't care if the world doubts this thing at this time or what, but since I have made it today, I will provide it to you for free at the first time. When it is time for autumn planting, I will give you a holiday. During autumn planting, no matter the official rank, there would be a few days of holiday. This was a law set by the current emperor to encourage agriculture. But as for the academy, although there were no clear rules, basically, no one had set a precedent. Today, Zhang Feng's words. It was not because of anything else. They were all commoners from the bottom rung of society. At this time, they came to the academy to learn the most advanced and awesome things that everyone else had to look up to. Their dean was the youngest Confucian scholar and the person who was most likely to surpass Wei Zheng's existence. Everyone in the world thought that he was a person who was more accomplished than the godly Dr. Sun Simiao. This was why the 6 Confucian scholars were willing to come to the academy. What was the reason for this? It was not because of a few jars of wine, nor was it because Zhang Feng was thick-skinned, nor was it because they were after Zhang Feng's little bit of salary. It was mainly because of the teaching philosophy on the academy, as well as the feeling of awe that everyone felt when they saw the white deer college uniform. It was the simple and unadorned kind that Zhang Feng said. That's right. Zhang Feng said so much. He said so much in every speech. It was just to explain one thing. Don't forget your roots. Forgetting one's roots was an extremely terrifying thing. At this time, among the 3,000 students, some seemed to have thought of this point. However, most of them were immersed in Zhang Feng's impassioned speech and were unable to extricate themselves. At this time, Ma Zhou and the others were so emotional that they bowed deeply. When Li Qingqian and the others saw this, although they did not want to, they still bowed with them. With this bow, all the students began to follow suit. When Zhang Feng saw this, he waved his hand slightly and said, "All of you get up. There's no need to do this. I'm giving you a break, but there's a condition. The condition is that you have to work in the fields personally. When the time comes, I'll give you an assignment. It can be considered an assessment for this semester." Li Shimin could not help but look at Zhang Feng with some surprise. He asked, "What kind of assessment are you planning? Don't tell me you want them to work in the fields?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "That's right. I've come up with a poem. Today I'll give it to all of you." Hoeing crops at noon, sweat dripping down to the soil. Who knows that every grain of rice on the plate is laborious? Only when you truly realize how difficult it is to obtain these grains, will you know how to walk your own path in the future. Even the current emperor, from what I know, will personally work in the fields in the imperial manor on Longshou Mountain, let alone all of you? Don't tell me you feel that your status is more noble than the emperor? Today I'm giving you an assignment. From tomorrow onwards, every one of you will have to choose a piece of land on the mountain. The size of the land will depend on you. But this piece of land must be personally planted by you. Do not count on others. And from today onwards, whether you want to eat meat or soil on the mountain, that will depend on you. The things that you plant, the livestock that you breed, will all need to be reported to the kitchen. Then, every year, according to your income from that year, the standard of your meals will be determined. Of course, these things that are produced will all be returned to the kitchen. This matter I'll leave it to Du Dabing. Chapter 1446. In an instant, all the students were in an uproar. In their cognition, studying was the most noble thing. But why did studying become so cheap here? Moreover, they had to plant food by themselves? Although these things were not a big deal for most of the students, for some of them who had been spoiled since childhood, it was uncomfortable. For example, Dugo. For example, Li Qingqian and the others. At this moment they were all frowning. For example, Ouyang Sun, on the other hand, laughed loudly and said, "All of you must remember clearly what the dean has said today. Of course, the academy will pay for all the seeds and fertilizers. As for those of you who don't know how to grow crops, I have 2 suggestions here. First, voluntarily withdraw from the academy. My academy will write a document, and on this document, it will state that you all don't know how to grow crops and won't write anything else. As for the second, that is to ask the students around you and humbly ask for advice. If you don't know how hard it is to get the food on the plate, how will you know how hard it is to get the Tang Dynasty in the future? In the future, no matter what you do, it will be closely related to the academy. Although the academy has given you glory and let you be arrogant in Chang'an City, don't forget that it is the academy that has given you this. The academy has the right to withdraw it. It can do so at any time. And everything the dean said today is to remind you of one thing, that is, don't forget your original intention. This is a guiding stone that will determine how far you can go in the future. Only with it in your hands, you will not lose yourself in sensual pleasures." Zhang Feng's words were a little harsh today. However, Zhang Feng had thought about it before he came. In fact, he had wanted to do this for a long time. The reason why he bought so much land this time was also for a purpose. Want him to plant food? Are you kidding me? Would he plant food? This time he spent so much money to buy the land because of the phosphate fertilizer and the students on the mountain. After all, they were only the first batch of students and there would be many more in the future. These things were actually for the world to see. One had to know that at this time, everyone was waiting for Zhang Feng's answer. They were also feeling ashamed of the pair of hands behind his back. This was Zhang Feng's explanation to the people of the world, which was also his attitude. Those who follow me will always have meat to eat. Those who don't follow me, you can just drool. The lecture time was more than the experiment time. After Zhang Feng finished talking about these things, only Li Qingqian and the others were left to perform. They performed the experiment while explaining the theory of the experiment to the students. As for Zhang Feng, after his speech, he slipped away under the eager gazes of the students. Li Xin's, one of the 2 compassionate peasants, was the only one left. After that, Li Shimin personally wrote the poem. After that, he laughed and left with Yu Shernan and the others. The matter had already ended. If they stayed here, it would only increase the pressure in the hearts of the students. They went directly to Zhang Feng's villa together. Zhang Feng's door was wide open. He seemed to have expected that they would follow. At this time even the tea had been poured and he was waiting for them. As soon as they entered the room, Zhang Feng said, "Let's make it clear first. This matter is my personal decision. It is also my decision as the dean. There is no room for negotiation." Zhang Feng had to give them a heads up first. Although he didn't know what they would ask, Zhang Feng's intuition told him that these people would definitely ask all kinds of reasons for doing so. It was not that Zhang Feng didn't want to say. They asked because they were too lazy to say. As for why the academy for the first time let the students participate in the matter of eating in the future, in fact, Zhang Feng himself didn't know. Although it was said that it was there, Zhang Feng just wanted to slow down. There were too many things in the past 2 days. In addition, Zhang Feng had to think about the promotion and production of this phosphate fertilizer. Therefore Zhang Feng's head really hurt at this time. If it wasn't because Lao Li wanted to see Zhang Feng do the experiment, Zhang Feng would really be too lazy to do it. At this time he just wanted to cover his head and have a good sleep. But obviously, Li Shimin and the others didn't take his words seriously. Hearing Zhang Feng's words, Li Shimin laughed. He took out Zhang Feng's poem and said, "Did you just compose this again? Or did you already think about it?" Zhang Feng's expression froze and said, "It's just a casual remark. How can I be so awesome to think about it in advance?" Yu Shernan and the others had always felt that Zhang Feng seemed to have been prepared for this. At this time when they heard him say this, they were a little annoyed and said, "So you mean that everyone in the world is inferior to you?" Zhang Feng was sweating profusely in an instant. This was copying someone else's poem. Why did he need to think for so long? Wasn't it something that could be done easily? Moreover, this poem was in the future. Which one of them, from 70 to 80 years old to 5 or 6 years old children, did not know how to memorize a few poems? This was the simplest of them. No, Mr. Bosher, you think too much. This poem was actually written by my feelings. It's not a good poem. It can only be considered a limerick. When he said this, Yu Shernan's expression became even worse. He slammed the table and said, "So you mean that we don't even have the right to write in the future?" Chapter 1447. Zhang Feng instantly felt that this might be a conspiracy. This was definitely a conspiracy. Otherwise, why would nothing happen to him when he had created so many poems? Why would such a big thing happen now? There was definitely a conspiracy. Otherwise, why would he make such a big fuss over this matter? Moreover, it was with so many people as if they had discussed it beforehand. When Zhang Feng thought of this, he was furious. He glanced at the old scholar. At this time, the old scholar was actually not speaking up for him. Zhang Feng was a little speechless. He said, "Actually, there is still some truth to this matter. What is going on? Actually, I am just expressing my feelings. I am not targeting anyone. You have also seen how big of a mess this phosphate fertilizer matter has caused. I just want to do something meaningful. At the very least, before the locusts arrive next year, every household will be able to save up some food. Otherwise, if they say it's someone else, even I won't be able to fight back. You have also seen it. For the past few years, I have almost exhausted all my savings to get this little bit of food. If you are talking about the future, then how can I? Where will I get food from in the future and next year? This year, the great Tang has practically emptied itself out in order to barely keep the mouths of the people shut. What about next year? The most important thing is that if I don't do something next year, not to mention the common people, even those in the imperial court who don't know their place and don't like the academy will hit us when we are down. The common people are the scariest when they are hungry. Therefore, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, I said the ugly words. I can't command others, but there are more than 3,000 students in the academy, which means more than 3,000 families. These people are walking signboards. Once their families accept the phosphate fertilizer, what do you think the people, their neighbors, their relatives will think? Before this, our academy's reputation has always been very good. That's why I thought of this. This is also the last trump card I can use now. Once this trump card is used, the phosphor fertilizer matter is basically settled. Zhang Feng chose to surrender directly. At this time, no matter how much he said to these people, it would be nonsense. The only way was to tell the main reason for this matter. Otherwise, these old foxes would definitely find out every little detail of his background clearly. Instead of this, Zhang Feng might as well tell them all his plans. At least, Li Shimin, Wei Jing, Zhang Sun Wuji, and the others listened and nodded repeatedly. Yu Shernan, Xiucai, and the others were also bursting with joy. On the contrary, Ouyang Sun pointed out of the window and said, "Fengzi, what you said is right. But have you thought about it? This mountain is only so big. Apart from the residential areas and some important places, where else can people grow crops? Besides, even if there is, have you thought about it? There are more than 3,000 students, plus the handymen on the mountain and so on. There are about 4,000 people altogether. Even if each person has 1 mu of land, where do you plan to let these people go and grow crops? Ahem. Yu Qigong coughed and looked at Zhang Feng strangely. This kid just spent hundreds of thousands of taels of silver to buy a large piece of land. Before, I did not know that although this kid is greedy for money, he is not a person who likes to grow crops. Now I understand that this kid is playing this game. This time. Yu Shernan and the others finally understood. This bastard, so he was prepared long ago. But even so, Ouyang Sun still asked with a gloomy face, even so, I want to ask, what is this academy of yours for? The academy is supposed to focus on the student studies, but what about you? You spend all your time learning this and that, but in the end you want the students to go to the fields to grow crops? If you really want to do this, then do we have to go to the fields to work? However, Zhang Feng said uncertainly, No, that's not what I meant. In fact, to put it bluntly, I'm doing this to show the potential of the agricultural course. Although there was an agricultural course at the beginning, there has never been any practical development. So I want to use this matter to show the potential of the agricultural course. Ouyang Sun was shocked when he heard this. But he also thought of this point. When they first vacated the farm and turned it into an incubation garden, they realized this point. However, Zhang Feng never said anything. In the incubation garden, after some things were planted on the day of the autumn planting ceremony, there was no movement at all. So they did not have any other thoughts. But at this time they did not expect that Zhang Feng was still thinking about this. Not only that, he had just bought so much land. How could this make Ouyang Sun and the others feel better? The academy. It was a place that taught people to be kind. But what about Zhang Feng? He actually treated it as a place where he only cared about himself and did whatever he wanted. How could this be? Then Ouyang Sun pulled Li Gang and the old village chief and the other two fiercely criticized Zhang Feng. This made Zhang Feng even more depressed. Damn it, what was wrong with today? Did they eat gunpowder? Chapter 1448. Zhang Feng did not understand. As a big agricultural country, this matter should be the most important thing. But why was it that when it came to this place, it made these lords so angry? Moreover, this thing, to put it bluntly, there was a work-study system in the later generations, not to mention the later generations. In the later generations, didn't people from all walks of life have to go back to their villages to work during the autumn planting every year? What was wrong with this? Besides, there were almost 5,000 people on the mountain, which meant that there were more than 5,000 mouths. This did not include the people in the market at the foot of the mountain. If the people in the paper mill, food factory, rubber factory, and so on were counted, there would be a total of 6,000 people. These 6,000 people were equivalent to more than 6,000 mouths. The current situation was that even if the academy was not short of money, it was impossible to buy food with money. Looking at the whole Tang dynasty, which family had more food now? It was not common to rely only on buying food. They had to come up with a long-term plan, which was to grow their own food. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng looked at them carefully. Seeing that they seemed to have a lot of questions, he smiled and said, Dear masters, look at the current situation on Mount Shao. Including the students of the academy, the handymen, the craftsmen, and the recruited refugees, there are at least 6,000 or 7,000 people on Mount Shao. There are so many mouths waiting for me to eat. Even though I have many wonderful ideas and can find money, there is a saying that goes, help the needy, not the poor. Right now, I can still count on my own business to buy more food, but you can see the current situation. How much food is left for us to buy? It's okay for a few years, but what about next year? What about after the famine year next year? This is not a long-term plan. Besides, even if I can do business now and the business on the mountain is still okay, but these things are just small businesses. Do you think that ordinary people really know how to do business? The business skills that I have written, let alone the students, even those who are doing it, I told you, may not know some of the twists and turns in it, let alone the refugees who rely on the academy. Still the same question, can ordinary people really make money? I don't think so. Relying on one's strength to earn money and relying on the heavens to eat will never lead to success. Moreover, these methods will never be as effective as using one's brain to earn money. For example, my esteemed self, just how many of the people of the Great Tang know how to observe when the Zhuang family needs fertilizer? When is the right time to irrigate? Just by looking at the appearance of the farmers, can you tell if the farmers lack any fertilizer? No. Zhang Feng said with some grief and indignation, they only know how to follow the natural laws of heaven and earth. When they plant crops, they have to wait until it rains. Then they have to fertilize the farmers in the field and then remove the weeds. How ridiculous is this? Can the seeds really germinate? Do the Zhuang family's grain really need some fertilizer? Don't these farmers to say they lack of fertilizer? Do they know all these? I believe, not to mention others, I think most of us here don't know these things. The old Xiaocai looked at Zhang Feng with shock and said, "Then you said so much, is it because you want everyone on Shao Mountain to learn to read, not just the children in the academy?" "I want to try." Zhang Feng nodded heavily and said, "When I opened the academy I told you, old Xiaocai, and I also told you, Lao Li, that I don't care how many people I can make literate. I don't have the ability to make all the people in the world learn to read, and I don't have the power to do so. I just feel that I have to give the people I want a better life, that's all." The old Xiaocai was shocked by Zhang Feng's words and shook his head. "Fengzi, your idea is really good, but have you thought about it? These people are refugees and farmers who have no knowledge at all. How can they understand this knowledge? Even if you really want to teach them now, have you thought about it? The first thing these people want when they wake up every morning is to go somewhere to earn some money for breakfast. Every day when they go to sleep, they think about how they can bear the burden of a grudge between a penny and a penny today. Moreover, as the saying goes, a gentleman works his mind while a villain works his body. If you only pick a dozen or 100 people, it may be possible. But if you want to teach everyone on Shao Mountain, not to mention you, even Confucius couldn't do it if I wanted to see it." Teacher Wen nodded and said, "Young friend Zhang Feng, I can understand your thoughts, but Brother Zihuai is right. Every day these people think about how to make the farmers in the fields take more and less spoil, and pray that God will pity them. How can they have the time to think so much? I know you want to do the best for the world, but there has to be a limit. It has to be done step by step." Immediately Yu Shernan and the others, including Wei Zheng and the others, nodded and agreed with Li Gang's words. Looking at everyone's shocking appearance, Zhang Feng suddenly realized that he seemed to be talking to a chicken and a duck. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng waved his hand and stopped the crowd. "Stop, I have something to say." Chapter 1449. In fact, Zhang Feng could understand these things after thinking about it. After all, Zhang Feng, who came from the future, had a deep-rooted understanding that anyone could study. According to his understanding, anyone could study. Even the lowliest commoner had the right to study. Moreover, they also had the possibility to become the pillars of the country. If Zhang Feng were to talk about these historical figures, he might not be able to explain them clearly even if he spent 3 days and 3 nights talking about them. However, Yu Shernan and the others had a completely different understanding. Zhang Feng could see in their eyes that a scholar was a scholar and a commoner should be a commoner. This was the understanding engraved in the bones of the people of this era. In the beginning, when Zhang Feng opened the academy, they had opposed it. However, at that time, Zhang Feng opened the academy and it was considered orthodox. Therefore, although Yu Shernan and the others were not happy, they could accept it. But now, Zhang Feng actually wanted to teach the commoners on the mountain. This difficulty, in their eyes, was tantamount to reaching the sky. Only those who were born with a prominent family, some good bloodline, and those who had the inheritance of a powerful family could become talents. However, these were not a problem for Zhang Feng. Even at this moment, in front of the teaching building, Ma Zhou and a few other commoners were talking about the magical knowledge of physics to the students of the academy. However, Yu Shernan and the others seemed to have some resistance in their hearts. This might have a lot to do with this era. In this era, commoners usually referred to people like Prince Consort Zhou and Chujun Laiji. However, in the future, commoners included the poor. In the beginning of the Tang Dynasty, commoners were only compared to those who were not from the noble families, such as the families of merchants and so on. Only those who had some basic conditions could be called commoners. In fact, this was very easy to understand. If you could not eat, how would you have the time to read and learn? For these people, there was only one evaluation for them. Reading? Were they worthy? There was no good or evil in people who had such an idea. It was a deep-rooted way of thinking, just like Zhang Feng's idea that everyone was equal and everyone could read. No one would think that people who had such an idea were evil or good. Zhang Feng also knew that there was no need to argue about these things. Even if they argued for 3 days and 3 nights, there would be no conclusion. In the face of inherent thinking, there was really nothing to say. Therefore, Zhang Feng sighed and said, "Teachers, this must be a road that you can't walk on, right?" When Yu Shernan and the others heard this, they could not help but choose to remain silent. Even Li Shimin sighed and didn't say anything. At this moment, Zhang Feng looked at the crowd and said, "But if you don't even have the courage to try, how can you succeed? If I am to truly succeed this time around, then, esteemed teachers, think about it. What sort of sensational effect will these 1,000+ people bring? First of all, these people can read and know what should be planted first in their crops, when there is a shortage of water, when there is a lack of fertilizer, when the roots of the crops are eaten by insects, and this is not the most important thing. When they can really read and write, won't it be better for them to do business in their leisure time? For example, they only know how to collect a little scattered copper coins. In their knowledge, they only know how to install things. What if someone gives them an ingot of silver, what will they do? This is a kind of knowledge. It has nothing to do with the skills of merchants. It is to teach them how to calculate. You have seen that now that the waterway trade route has been opened, coupled with the trade with Zhenla, as long as we take down the trade center of Chiaotzi City this time, more merchants from the western regions will flock to Chang'an City. What kind of place is Chang'an? This is the center of the entire Tang Dynasty and the center of power of the entire Tang Dynasty. It is a place that will be worshipped by all countries in the future. If outsiders know that the people in Chang'an City are illiterate and don't know how to do business, what will it be? It will be a disgrace to the Tang Dynasty. It will be a disgrace to those of us who promote the culture of the Tang Dynasty and let the people in the world learn and use it. Not to mention other places, even in Chang'an City, he can't make some people literate. What will the merchants and the people who come to pay tribute to the Tang Dynasty think? What will His Majesty think? Is this what he thinks? Are we doing something useless that will smear the name of the great Tang? And even if His Majesty doesn't say this, as scholars, don't we feel ashamed to face the world and the sages? Chapter 1450. After Zhang Feng said this, he still maintained his smile. This was the first time he felt humiliated. The people present were basically the top figures of this era, but at this moment, they were looking at him as if he was a monster, deep in thought. Because of this, Zhang Feng felt that he had to maintain his smile and create an image of himself being very awesome and mysterious. The weather was still gradually turning cold. The birds in the sky, accompanied by the falling leaves, swirled and fell from the sky. At this moment, the entire Guangzhou area had already fallen into a beautiful picture of autumn planting. Although at this time the government and White Deer College came out to distribute the few selected seeds, there were still very few people who could afford to buy them. Except for the people of the Tang Dynasty in the area of Shao Mountain, at this time, basically all the people in ragged clothes were wandering on the mountain path from time to time, wanting to see if there would be any good news from the mountain, or if someone would suddenly say that the mountain would give them free seeds and food and other wonderful things. It seemed that in their memory, White Deer College still had the impression of opening the granary to provide relief to the victims of the famine a few years ago. Although the imperial court had already announced that this year's autumn planting grain would be distributed one by one according to the usual grain price, the grain was precious. If they could get some grain from Shao Mountain now, wouldn't they be able to get more grain this year and have more harvest next year? There were quite a few people who had such a beautiful dream. At this time, at the foot of the ruined mountain, countless people were watching. They were squatting on the ridges beside the fields, or looking at the black satin road that they had never seen before. On the mountain, in the farm hatchery, Ma Zhou was excitedly pulled over by Li Qingqian and the others. Although he was ordered to farm by his father when he was on Longzhou Mountain and when he worshipped heaven, those were just to fool the eyes of the officials. How could he have the chance to work in the field personally? At this moment, Li Qingqian had demonstrated his prowess in front of everyone in the academy. He had experimented more than 10 times in a row. If not for the lack of phosphor stones, he might have continued his experiments. As soon as the class ended, Li Qingqian, Qing Chumo, and the others dragged Ma Zhou, Lai Ji, and the others over. As soon as he entered the door, he saw old Gao squinting his eyes. There was a teapot beside his hand. He was lying on a recliner made of bamboo and waving a Buddha whisk made of long and thin bamboo poles and palm leaves from time to time. It was as if they were trying to scare away the wild animals that dared to come to the fields for food. However, under the seemingly mighty Buddha whisk, a few Luhua chickens were clucking, leading a group of their offsprings to dig for food in the field. Even the group of chicks chirped and ran to old Gao's shoes, lying down and taking a nap. It seemed that old Gao's shoes were very comfortable and warm, far warmer than the cold ground. A pair of yellow citrons with tender lips would jump out of old Gao's exposed ankles from time to time. In the distance, a black pig with black skin was humming as it plowed out beautiful scrolls in the field, and then elegantly nested in them and fell asleep comfortably. From time to time, it would hum twice as if it was sleeping very comfortably. The arrival of Li Qingqian was undoubtedly the chief culprit who broke this temporary tranquility. As soon as they arrived, first of all, the pig groaned and woke up in an instant. It rolled a few times before it struggled to get up from the gully. Then, the chicken flapped its wings and clucked to call its offspring. An old Gao was also awakened by this harmonious sound. Old Gao was first startled by the sound of chickens and pigs in the field, and then he fiercely waved the bamboo pole in his hand and angrily chased away these culprits. They were driven out of the field. Damn animals, sooner or later Lao Tzu will kill you and eat you. Old Gao scolded as he held the frightened chick at his feet in his hand, touched it, and then put it on his shoulder. Then he hurriedly came to Li Qingqian, bowed and said, "So it's young Master Li? May I know why young Master Li is here?" Li Qingqian looked at the terrible experimental field, and then looked at Old Gao with a strange expression and said, "Old Gao, we're here for nothing else. We just want to farm. If you have nothing to do, you can go and do your thing. We'll also take a look at the field that Feng Zi planted before." Old Gao felt a little incredulous. The Crown Prince was going to farm in person? He hurriedly asked, "Young Master Li, does President Zhang know that you're here? If he didn't ask us to come, do you think we would come? And in the future, if it's not us, all the students in the academy will have to farm." What? This time Old Gao was instantly dumbfounded. But he didn't dare to ask the Crown Prince. He hurriedly pulled Ma Zhou and asked, "Tell me, are you sure this is Feng Zi's idea?" Ma Zhou nodded and said seriously, "This is indeed what the dean said in front of Mr. Bosher and all the students just now." Old Gao's face instantly changed when he heard this and he exclaimed, "Ah, things are not good." Chapter 1451. After Old Gao exclaimed, he hurriedly ran out of the door. Perhaps he was going to find Zhang Feng to ask about this matter. After all, the people standing in front of him were the crown prince of the imperial court and the heirs of the various dukes. These people were here to farm? Wasn't this a joke? Once this matter was heard by the people in the imperial court, it would cause turmoil in the imperial court. He had to be careful. At this moment, even the few of them did not dare to greet him and hurriedly ran away. Li Qingqian and the others were stunned. What's going on? Ma Zhou also did not understand the situation. He scratched his head and said, "Why don't we go inside and take a look at the things that the dean personally planted, and then we'll get a bunch of them next to his field?" Li Qingqian heard this and nodded. After all, this was the first time he was so excited and could not wait to do something. Cheng Chumo clenched his fists and looked left and right. He went into the first floor of the gray building. In an instant, a series of angry roars of pigs and shrill screams rang out. After a moment, Cheng Chumo came out with a pile of farm tools. However, at this moment, his white and blue robe was stained with a lot of pig dung. In an instant, Zhang Sun and the others pinched their noses in disdain. Cheng Chumo was so angry that he threw away the hoe in his hand and angrily sat down where Old Gao had just sat. Seeing this, Ma Zhou rolled his eyes and said, "Young Master Li, my teacher has said that this experimental field is an extremely important place for our academy. Moreover, my teacher has also said that everything here is confidential. If it were not for the fact that you are old acquaintances of the headmaster, I would not dare to bring you here without my teacher's permission. Young Master Li, shall we begin?" Li Qingqian glanced at Cheng Chumo and then nodded with a smile. "Then I'll have to trouble Brother Ma." Immediately, Ma Zhou and the others picked up the farm tools from the ground and then led Li Qingqian into the hatchery. At this time, although there were pigs, chickens, ducks, birds, mice and so on in the hatchery, generally speaking it was okay. At this time, the wheat field that Zhang Feng, Li Qingqian and Cheng Chumo were farming had already been sprinkled with a thin layer of pot-bottom ash. Cheng Chumo and the others didn't care about other things, but this was something that they had personally farmed. Moreover, it was a product that was mixed with phosphate fertilizer, so they were naturally very attentive. When they saw the appearance of the field, they couldn't help but feel a little confused. Li Qingqian pointed at the ashes at the bottom of the pot in the field and asked, "Brother Ma, what is the meaning of this?" Ma Zhou didn't know what this meant, nor did he know what was going on. He said in surprise, "I don't know either, but this piece of land was taken care of by my teacher personally, so there are some things that I really don't know. However, I feel that since the dean wants to do this, he naturally has his reasons. Otherwise, why would the dean bring this thing here? And as far as I know, these things are only used when planting." Cheng Chumo put his hands on his waist and squeezed through the crowd. He looked at the ashes in the field and said, "Previously, Feng Zi wrapped the seeds with a layer of this stuff, saying that it can repel insects. This seems to be repellent to insects too, right?" As he spoke, Cheng Chumo carefully threw away a little bit of the soil at the edge of the field. However, when he threw away the soil in his hands, he instantly saw a few tender yellow sprouts fluttering in the wind. Li Qingqian also asked in surprise, "These are the sprouts of wheat? The wheat sprouted so quickly?" Cheng Chumo was a little confused. Didn't they just plant it for a little more than 10 days? Logically speaking, the wheat shouldn't have sprouted at this time. And now, as you can see, some of the fields haven't been planted yet, and some of them are still uncultivated. Could it be the effect of the phosphate fertilizer? Yes. When Du Go and the others heard this, they instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. Immediately after, Li Qingqian hurriedly dug up a pile of soil and held the sprouted wheat seed in his hands, carefully examining it. The sprouts of the wheat seed were less than the height of a finger joint, but compared to the wheat seeds they saw before, they were much more robust. At this time, the wheat seed was still wrapped in a layer of black ash. Cheng Chumo didn't believe in heresy. He turned around and dug a few times in the field that the students planted before. Not to mention that the things in the field were still the same, some of the seeds had actually started to rot after being soaked in the water. Some of the seeds were even badly damaged by the insects in the ground. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that some of the more plump seeds had some tender yellow marks at the tip of the seeds. However, in comparison, it wasn't difficult to tell which seeds were better and which were worse. Li Qingqian looked at the seeds in his hands and in Cheng Chumo's hands. His heart was already in turmoil. This thing's terrifying side could be seen at this time. What about in the future? All of this was phosphate fertilizer. Previously they were still wondering if this phosphate fertilizer would be effective. However, when Cheng Chumo carelessly tossed it down, they instantly discovered the difference. This gave Li Qingqian hope. Li Qingqian carefully shook the seeds in Cheng Chumo's hands into his own, then said in a trembling voice, "You guys do it first, I'll go find Feng Zi and my father." Chapter 1452. At the same time, in Zhang Feng's villa, the debate was still going on. Yu Shernan and the others' point of view was that it was fine for ordinary people. Those who were below the age of 20 still had spiritual energy. If they were to learn at this age, they could still make up for it. However, how were they going to teach people above the age of 20? Moreover, who was going to teach these people? It was all a matter of time and money. Who had the time? It was better to teach the students in the academy. It was better than anything else. Li Shimin also felt that this made sense. After all, how could those fools teach them how to read and read? If they all went to study, what would happen to the farmers in the fields? If everyone in the world yearned for it, wouldn't all the farmers in the world be left barren? When Zhang Feng saw this, he couldn't take it anymore. He said, "Lao Li, what do you mean by this? Although these people are a little stupid, their thinking is deeply ingrained. We're just teaching them some basic knowledge. Words will do. We're not asking them to take the imperial examinations. What are you afraid of?" Li Shimin waved his hand and said with a serious expression, "You're wrong about that. We know what you mean. This is a good thing. You're really thinking about the people. However, have you thought about it? At this time, everyone is thinking about how to fill their stomachs. Where would they have the time to do such trivial things? Fengzi, we all know what you're planning. However, you're being a little rash. You're planning to teach these people on the mountain because they're your neighbors and you can't bring yourself to do it." When Zhang Feng heard this, he thought about it and didn't refute. After all, Lao Li was right. However, at this moment, Zhang Feng thought about it and suddenly said, "I say, we're talking about the students of the academy going to work in the fields. Why are we talking so far away? Later I'll list out my plan. When the time comes, you'll understand when you see it. Do you have to talk about it for so long?" "No." Xue Ji, who had not spoken much, said faintly, "I have been thinking about this for a long time, but I still think it is impossible. Even if it is what you said, it is easy to let the students of the academy go to the foot of the mountain to teach the people. It is actually very difficult to do it. I think this matter should be delayed. At the very least, I have to wait until you take out." Zhang Feng had long been annoyed. He seriously suspected that the reason why so many people were saying so much today was to make him back off. To put it bluntly, they just didn't want the students to farm. This kind of thing had never happened before. Moreover, the current situation was that they did not even have enough food to plant the seeds. How could they have the ability to get the academy to take out so much food in an instant? Do the students of the academy still need to eat? Zhang Feng was very clear about this. At this moment, he smiled slightly and said, "Actually, I understand your thoughts and intentions. You're just worried that the food in our academy is not enough, right?" Yu Shernan revealed an expression that said, "At least you know what's good for you. Now, you don't have any reason to persist, right? What you want to do can be done, but you have to wait until after this year. That is to say, you have to wait until this season's harvest. If it is really as you said that the world can have enough food and clothing, then you can go and do it. The people, when there is no livelihood crisis at this time, no matter what you do, they will approve of you. As for now," Shueji lit a cigarette as he spoke and said, "Now let's think about the phosphate fertilizer. Also, I just heard from Lao Li that you have already asked people to buy land? Now listen to me and sell all the land. We are the academy. The academy is a place to teach and educate people. Moreover, the identity of a student is also there. If you do so, then the people in Shandong, the people in the imperial court who don't like you, and the person hiding behind you, will definitely not let go of such an opportunity." Ding. At this moment, Old Gao's voice sounded at Zhang Feng's door. Zhang Feng also took the opportunity to hurriedly open the door and stop this topic. As soon as he opened the door, Old Gao was also shocked. He habitually bowed down and was about to bow down, but he was caught by Zhang Feng and said in horror, "Old Gao, what's wrong with you? Why did you bow to me as soon as you came in?" Old Gao looked at Zhang Feng and then looked at Li Shimin behind him. Seeing Li Shimin's eyes, he suddenly understood. He stood up and said, "I want to ask you something. You have to tell me honestly." Seeing Old Gao like this, Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "Go ahead. Are you going to let young Master Li and the other students of the academy go to farm?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "I do have such a plan. This is also the reason why I set up the agricultural product incubation garden. Is there a problem?" Seeing this, Old Gao was relieved and said, "Then it's okay. Just now, young Master Li and Ma Zhou went to the incubation garden and said that they were going to farm. I still didn't dare to believe it. You said before that no one is allowed to enter that place, but young Master Li's status is different, so I came to ask, Fengzi." At this moment, Li Qingqian waved his hands and came from afar. Looking at Zhang Feng at the door, he couldn't help shouting, "Fengzi, you're out. You're out." Zhang Feng's expression froze. Li Shimin and the others were also slightly stunned when they heard this. They looked at each other and then hurried to the door. Looking at Li Qingqian, Li Shimin scolded, "What happened? How can you be so improper?" Seeing this, Li Qingqian waved his hands and said, "The wheat that Fengzi personally planted has sprouted." Chapter 1453. This time, Li Shimin and the rest could no longer sit still. The wheat sprouted? How could it be so fast? How long had it been? Now, from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, so much land was empty. There were even many people waiting for the seeds. And Zhang Feng's wheat sprouted? Did it have to be so fast? And most importantly, the wheat had only been planted for 10 days. It sprouted so quickly? One had to know that if the wheat was planted in the ground, it would take at most half a month for it to sprout, okay? Could it be that this was the effect of the phosphate fertilizer? Just as everyone was anticipating, Li Qingqian had already rushed over. Li Shimin couldn't wait to step forward and open Li Qingqian's hand. In Li Qingqian's hand, the wheat on his left hand already had a fingernail-high sprout. And on his right hand, it was the normal wheat, shriveled. Some had already withered. There were even some wheat that had been bitten by insects and rats until it was incomplete. Only an extremely small number of wheat had traces of tender white sprouts at the top. Looking at the seeds on Li Qingqian's left hand, which were full of tender yellow sprouts, they were still growing healthily. And most importantly, besides being slightly moist, the layer of ash on the seeds was still there. Li Shimin gently peeled off the ashes from the bottom of the pot. Not only were the seeds still plump, they were even more robust. In an instant, Li Shimin couldn't help but peel off the seeds in Li Qingqian's hand, revealing the plump seeds within. Wei Zheng, Yu Shernan and the rest also gathered around, staring at the seeds in Li Qingqian's hand with eyes full of shock. In an instant, the difference between those that had been filtered and those that hadn't. Needless to say, everyone could see it clearly. Li Shimin turned to look at Zhang Feng. Seeing that he seemed to be fine, he asked, "Fengzi, this thing of yours? Did you use something else?" Zhang Feng shrugged and said, "This is the power of knowledge. Actually, Mr. Bosher and the rest saw it at that time. I just filtered the seeds and then wrapped them with a layer of ash. The rest, I just used some phosphate fertilizer. That's all." This time, Li Shimin was really shocked. Wei Zheng and the rest also looked at Zhang Feng with eyes full of surprise. In their knowledge, the seeds in Li Qingqian's right hand were the most normal. The seeds that had sprouted in his left hand, they had never seen them before. Most importantly, it was hard to say whether Zhang Feng had really used something else. At this time, everyone looked at Yu Shernan and the rest with a questioning look. Seeing this, Yu Shernan was also a little surprised and said, "This thing?" Old man did see everything with his own eyes. The water was indeed taken from the stream. There was nothing different about it. What? Li Shimin exclaimed in shock. Just a little bit of ash from the bottom of the pot could have such a magical effect? Then, in the past, in all the fields there were people who burned a lot of ash. How could there be so many insects? But Yimiao had never seen such a strong one before? Could it be, was this the problem of the seeds? Fengzi, tell me honestly. Did you really select these seeds and then they will become like this? Zhang Feng shook his head and said somewhat speechlessly, I have said that this is the power of knowledge. You don't believe me. Fine, I am too lazy to waste my saliva. If you believe me, then do as I say. I promise that all your food this year will be doubled. After saying that, Zhang Feng put his hands behind his back and walked into the villa slowly. Lying on the stool in the villa's living room, he closed his eyes and rested. Seeing this, Li Shimin gritted his teeth. This guy was definitely taking revenge on them for making things difficult for him just now. Otherwise, why would he be like this? At this time, the few of them had no choice but to call Cheng Chumo and the others over. Together with Yu Shernan, they carefully asked about everything that had happened in the field back then. The only thing left was to drag them to the fields to work on it personally. Li Shimin couldn't be blamed. After all, this seemingly simple but miraculous operation was really refreshing. Not to mention other things. However, it was such a simple move. It had only been 10 days. Comparing the two, there were already such significant results. What would happen in the future? Or the whole land of the Tang Dynasty, what would happen if this method was used? Would it really be like what Zhang Feng said? Would there really be a bright and fruitful year? Li Shimin had to be cautious. After all, this was something that concerned the safety of all the people in the world. Once something went wrong, there would be consequences beyond redemption. This consequence, Li Shimin couldn't afford it. Not to mention whether there would be a plague of locusts next year. Even if there was no plague of locusts, the people had to be fed. This year's plague of locusts had wiped out the foundation of the whole Tang Dynasty. What could Li Shimin do? What could he do? Chapter 1454. In fact, to put it bluntly, this thing was good. Li Shimin also wanted to do it, but this thing consumed too much food. Originally, 1 mu of land required 1 gene of seeds. Now, Li Shimin calculated that it was at least 3 times the amount. This was not including the other things. Then what was the use of picking the rest? Eating? That was to say, on average, a family with more than 10 mu of land would need at least 30 gene of wheat to be able to filter out the seeds. How many people were there in the Tang Dynasty? How many people were there in the Tang Dynasty? How much food was there? If this was a normal day, it would be fine. They could save it all. But at this time, how could they save it? Not to mention the seeds, even now there was not enough to eat. The food they had now was basically all of Li Shimin's savings. If something were to happen, he would have to starve. At this time, Li Shimin did not dare to imagine what would happen if something were to happen in the future. After all, although there was no news from Chiotzi for the time being, a war with Chiotzi would happen sooner or later. Once it broke out, it would be the most terrifying thing. At that time, there would be no food at all. Then, at this time, Li Shimin's worried face stunned Li Qingqian. He looked at the expressions of Yu Shernan, Yu Qigong, and the others. Although their eyes were full of surprise and love when they looked at the seeds, there seemed to be some worry. Li Qingqian could not help but ask in surprise, "Father, you are?" Li Shimin sighed and glanced at Zhang Feng in the villa, then said, "This matter, let's not talk about it for now. This matter can be discussed later." Hearing this, Li Qingqian hurriedly said, "Father, you have seen this seed. If it is really popularized, then as Fengzi said, the Tang Dynasty will really not lack food anymore. This is a good thing. How about? Do you know that the Tang Dynasty really can't afford to waste this thing at this time? Do you know how much food we have now? Gone. They were all gone. Even the grain stored in the prefecture has been released. But this is still not enough to satisfy the people of the entire Tang Dynasty. What do you think will happen if Fengzi's set of things are brought out at this time?" Li Qingqian hurriedly said, "Father, that's where you're wrong. Actually, Fengzi has already said that although this method wastes food, the filtered food can still be eaten. This doesn't mean that all of it can be wasted. Furthermore, look at the quality of the seeds. Think about the pigs that Fengzi mentioned before." Instantly. Only then did everyone remember the 300,000 pigs that had rushed up the mountain. At this time, hearing Li Qingqian mention it, Qing Yaojin asked in surprise, "Didn't the pig's gizzard already finish?" "That's right. Speaking of those pigs, didn't Fengzi slaughter all of them in the food factory at the foot of the mountain last time? Why are you bringing this up now?" Yu Shernan and the others didn't care about these things. It could be said that after Zhang Feng brought those pigs up the mountain, they didn't pay attention to this matter anymore. In addition, last time Zhang Feng went to slaughter those pigs down the mountain with great fanfare. After that, they didn't pay attention to this matter anymore. They only knew that Zhang Feng, Li Qingqian, and the others made a lot of achievements in Chang'an City, and then the same thing happened in the whole Tang Dynasty. For a while, because of the locust disaster, more than half of the pigs that were brought over from Tubo disappeared in an instant. At this time, when they heard Li Qingqian mention it, they couldn't help but be shocked. Ouyang Sun hurriedly asked, "Tell us in detail. Did Fengzi start to do this thing again? Then what's the matter with the pigs?" Li Shimin was also a little surprised. Li Qingqian glanced at them and said with a stiff face, "Do you still remember why Fengzi asked old Gao and the others to go up the mountain?" After asking this question, in an instant, Li Shimin and the others thought of the purpose of old Gao and the others to go up the mountain. It was all for the sake of baiting pigs. Could it be, for a while? They couldn't help but look strange. They looked at Zhang Feng, who was lying on the chair in the villa behind them, and asked, "Aren't the pigs all gone? At this time, what do you mean by this?" Li Qingqian said speechlessly, "Although the pigs on the mountain are gone, do you still remember the butcher? Zheng Tufu? The one who used to live in the gray building with old Gao." That butcher instantly reminded Li Shimin and the others. They seemed to have also found that they hadn't seen him for a long time, so they asked in surprise, "Qian, tell me this matter in detail." Then Li Qingqian told him everything about how the pigs were selected for breeding, and how Zheng Tufu went down the mountain to promote this new breed of pig that did not have a bad smell, and how they could grow 200 caddies of fat pigs in 3 months as well as the pig feed. He told him everything in detail. This time, not to mention Li Shimin. Even Yu Shernan and the others looked at each other with a dumbfounded expression. This matter seemed to be a small matter. But what did this mean? In the short span of 2 months, Zhang Feng had already changed the breed of pig that everyone despised. And now, although they hadn't seen that kind of pig, but thinking about it carefully, it seemed that the pork they ate now didn't have a bad smell. Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng's villa in surprise and said, "I finally understand why this guy asked me for a carpenter so mysteriously. I see. Chapter 1455. Before. They really didn't understand why Zhang Feng would spend so much effort to optimize and screen the seeds. In their opinion, as long as they used this phosphate fertilizer, even if it was a little thin, it would still be able to make the majority of the Zhuang family survive. Moreover, although some of the seeds were shriveled, they would still be able to survive with the help of the phosphate fertilizer. But now, it was Zhang Feng who single-handedly handled the matter of the pigs. At the beginning, he bought a lot of pigs, chickens, and ducks from Tubo Turks and other places to help kill the locusts. Then, after the locusts were killed, these things became a burden. Then he opened a food factory on the mountain. Zhang Feng tweaked all the stinky pork into something edible. Even the people in the court were basically using this kind of fresh thing. This was all because the Tangs at this time were basically tired of eating horse meat, donkey meat, and mutton meat. And this kind of thing, which they usually despised, suddenly became a popular food. This made people want to have a lively and fresh time. There was also a kind of magical trading method. They didn't want money but only food. This kind of strange method was simply unprecedented. At this time, it appeared in Chang, and then instantly attracted a large number of fans. This was all because of the amazing effect of the pork in the daily Chinese medicine. Even in Li Shimin's imperial kitchen, this dish was a must-have dish every day. This pork was fat but not greasy, unlike beef and mutton, which was hot and dry after eating. Moreover, after eating it, one's entire body would be smelled of something fishy. In their cognition, the pork, which had always been more stinky than beef and mutton, had become so delicious. And the most important thing was, this thing was actually so cheap that it was half dead. Even ordinary people could afford to eat it. Unconsciously, this thing had already made people think that this pork originally tasted like that. There were also rumors that this pork trotter had the effect of beautifying and nourishing one's skin. As long as one bought the prescription of Dr. Sun in the Chang and hotel and boiled it, it would work. In an instant, the whole pork directly became popular in the Tang Dynasty. Of course, everyone understood. Who was divine Dr. Sun? Would he lower himself to develop a beauty soup for such a trivial matter? This was definitely Zhang Feng's method without a doubt. At this moment, when Li Qingqian mentioned it, everyone suddenly realized that there was indeed such a thing. Now, most of the butchers in the food factory had changed professions. Furthermore, the river water was no longer blood red like it used to be. At this moment, everyone instantly understood that all of this had been planned by this kid for a long time. It was just that they had been paying attention to other things. Regarding this food thing, it seemed they had long stopped caring about it. Come to think of it, Zhang Feng hadn't personally cooked for them during this period of time except for the grilled fish last time. At the thought of this, everyone looked at Zhang Feng in the room at the same time. Moreover, the most important thing was, at this time, no matter how much he said, it would be a wild guess. Rather than that, he might as well ask Zhang Feng about it. At this moment, following the sound of horse hooves, everyone couldn't help but stop in their tracks. They suddenly looked over and saw Ma Xinliang rushing over with a bulging cloth bag on his back. Everyone's eyes instantly lit up. When Ma Xinliang arrived, Li Qingqian hurriedly stopped Ma Xinliang and asked, "What's the matter? Did you go to buy land?" Before Li Qingqian finished asking, Yu Qigong asked directly. Ma Xinliang naturally recognized these people, especially the Yu Qigongqing who bit the golden bull and entered the Tower of Dusk. How could the people who were with him be ordinary people? Moreover, several great scholars were here, so he didn't dare to act rashly. He hurriedly said, "Yes, I did go to buy land under the order of the dean." They secretly said, "As expected." Fang Xuanling's eyes flashed and he asked, "Did you buy the land at the city gate?" In an instant, everyone's eyes were fixed on Ma Xinliang. This guy was a veteran who retired from the battlefield and the instructor of the Liangzhou garrison. If he didn't know the purpose of this land, Li Shimin would really kill him. Seeing this, Ma Xinliang naturally knew the importance of this place. At this time, when he heard Fang Xuanling's question, he hurriedly said, "Although the dean asked for that land, I know how extraordinary it is. No matter how bold I am, I don't dare to buy that land. Moreover, Master Niu directly skipped that land and gave us the land from the Shirley Slope to the Shao Mountain." Hearing this, Li Shimin and the others breathed a sigh of relief, and their hanging hearts slowly relaxed. Seeing this, Yu Qigong said, "You don't have to go in for such a small matter. I'll go in and tell Fengzi. Just give me the land deed. Here." Although Ma Xinliang was hesitant, he still carefully handed the bag on his back to Yu Qigong. Although the bag wasn't big, it was quite heavy. He asked in surprise, "What's in it? It's so heavy." "It's all land deeds." Hearing this, everyone's expression froze. Yu Qigong waited in surprise and asked, "Tell me honestly, how much land did you buy?" "Well, not much, just 300 hectares. In an instant, Li Shimin's vision went black. He staggered and fell to the ground. Chapter 1456. In an instant, everyone's face changed dramatically. Niu Jinda quickly grabbed Li Shimin and asked in horror, "You said 300 mu? Master Niu, it's 300 mu. Buzz." In an instant, there was a buzzing sound in everyone's head. Damn it, this guy is dishonest. For a moment, the few of them were even more jealous. What was the emperor's attitude when they bought the land? He was afraid that they would buy too much land. Now this guy bought all the land he could buy. Now they felt comfortable. If the emperor didn't give them an explanation, when they went back they would secretly buy the land. Otherwise they would feel uneasy. At this time, Li Shimin was also frightened by the thick stack of land deeds. Before, he had made it clear in the court that no one was allowed to buy land privately. Now the more land he bought, the less land he could get. In addition, he also knew the benefits of phosphate fertilizer. At this time, when he saw the wheat sprouts promoted by phosphate fertilizer, he knew what this land meant. Once this thing could be implemented, it would definitely have an unprecedented effect. Only by controlling more land would he have more food in his hands. When the time came, no matter if there was a disaster or a war, he could still use it with a wave of his hand. Rather than collecting food, it would be safer to have the goods in his hands. Therefore, Li Shimin's purpose of coming to Shao Mountain this time was to directly issue an imperial edict after confirming this matter that no one was allowed to buy and sell land privately. But this guy, Li Shimin felt a little stuffy in his chest. Who was Zhang Feng? No matter how much land he wanted, he would give it to him with a wave of his hand. But it was different now. At this time, most of the people in the court were watching, and there was a pair of invisible big hands manipulating everything. At this time, if the news that Zhang Feng bought land was spread out and there were so many of them, then even if he issued an imperial edict, what was the use of it? At the very least, the people in the imperial court and those present here might not listen to them. Li Shimin took a deep breath. Today he suddenly felt that it was an absolutely wrong decision to come to the mountain. At least he should issue an imperial edict before going up the mountain. Alas. Li Shimin rubbed his forehead and waved his hand to let Ma Xinliang leave. Then with Niu Jinda's help he slowly walked to Zhang Feng's villa. As soon as he entered the door, Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin, who was supported on his back, in astonishment. Looking at his pale face, he asked, "What's wrong with you? Why are you like this after a while?" "Let's not talk about me first." Li Shimin rubbed his head and said, "Let me ask you first, what good thing did you do? Here's the 300 hectares of land you bought. Tell me why you bought these lands. Are you trying to rebel?" Zhang Feng heard this and immediately covered Li Shimin's mouth. He said, "Lao Li, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say this. If this matter is spread out, you'll be harming us. You know how to be afraid, kid? Shernan was a little speechless. He said, tell me first, what do you want to do with these 300 hectares of land? This matter will definitely alarm the emperor and all the civil and military officials. You should think clearly about this matter. When the time comes, let Lao Li go to Lord Zhangsun tonight and also Li Shaogong, Prince Li. Maybe there's still a chance to turn things around. As he spoke, Shernan kicked Du Ruhui, who was next to him. Under his gaze, Du Ruhui said unsteadily, as far as I know, the emperor said that he was going to draft a decree forbidding private purchases of land. Although I don't know why he hasn't issued a decree yet, many people know about this. If you do this, you'll undoubtedly give those people a reason to criticize you. What if during the morning court tomorrow someone mentions this to you then? Moreover, you're now a viscount and the chancellor of White Deer College. Although you don't hold a position in the court, you're still a fifth-rank official and receive a salary from the court. In the laws of the Tang Dynasty, it's already mentioned that an official in the court, unless it's a reward from the emperor, under normal circumstances they can't. No. Zhang Feng also instantly understood that the matter this time was serious. No wonder Lao Li was so scared. So it was because of this matter? He absolutely didn't dare to admit this at this moment. Li Shimin couldn't help but twitch his mouth and say, you still want to quibble at this time? Zhang Feng shook his head and said with righteous indignation, what are you all thinking? Don't you know what I said at the meeting just now? I said that I want all the students of White Deer College to farm. How much land can be farmed on the mountain? That's why I used my own money to buy everything that can be bought. Now it seems like 300 hectares is a lot, but have you thought about how our land will be given to all the students? They will all be distributed to the students. If each student gets 1 mu of land, then there will be more than 3,000 students. In addition to the many people on the mountain, there will be at least 5,000 people, right? These people do a good calculation. How much land can these people get? Chapter 1457. Zhang Feng's words. Instantly everyone was frightened. At this moment no one knew what to say. If what Zhang Feng said was true, then there really weren't many. But at this moment, Zhang Feng's words made everyone feel more and more uncomfortable. For a moment they didn't know what to say. Li Shimin also knew that if it was purely with words, even he couldn't win against Zhang Feng. He could only smile bitterly and say, come on, you've been setting a trap from the beginning, haven't you? Zhang Feng raised his hands aggrievedly and said, I'm innocent, I'm really innocent. How could I have so many thoughts? I'm very innocent, okay? Pfft. The old Xiaocai and Li Gang, who were drinking tea, couldn't help but spit out the tea in their mouths when they heard this. Originally the old Xiaocai already knew Zhang Feng's nature. Now that he heard Zhang Feng say this, he must know that the emperor couldn't gain any advantage, so he didn't say anything. But now that they heard Zhang Feng say this, the two of them couldn't sit still anymore. The old Xiaocai sighed and said, alas. I'm old, this matter has nothing to do with the academy. I'll go back and sleep for a while, I still have classes in the afternoon. Seeing this, Li Gang hurriedly got up and followed the old Xiaocai to leave. The next moment, Shernan and the others also found excuses to leave, leaving only Li Shimin and the others. Seeing this, Li Qingqian also took the opportunity to slip away. Seeing this, Li Shimin waved his hand speechlessly and said, that's enough, you brat. I'm hungry, go and get me something to eat first. Later we'll talk about the business. Zhang Feng was also a little hungry at this moment. He ate a meal full of salt at noon, how could he be full? As soon as they went upstairs they were all spat out by their throats. At this time when Li Shimin said that, they instantly felt hungry. They hurriedly said, okay, you guys wait first. I'll be back soon. I'll show you my skills today. Li Shimin watched as Zhang Feng went into the kitchen. With a serious expression he said, don't even think about the farmland. Let's talk about the phosphate fertilizer first. What do you think about phosphate fertilizer? At this moment, only then did everyone regain their senses. Wei Jing pondered for a while with a dignified expression and said, second master, I think this is possible. Moreover, I just talked with Dr. Sun and confirmed that the yellow ginger is indeed so fast because of the use of phosphate fertilizer. Moreover, the wheat sprouts that young Master Li brought just now already explained many problems. Therefore I think this will work. Yu Qigong and the others nodded in agreement. Seeing this, Li Shimin said, if that's the case then the most difficult part of this matter is this thing. Others can't see it, so how do we make the people accept this thing? This matter was the most difficult thing to do. Although they approved of this thing, the promotion of this thing didn't mean that it could be done with an imperial edict. It needed the people to accept it themselves. This was the most difficult part. At this time all the people had deep-rooted traditional thinking. Every time a new thing appeared, it would cause a big uproar. The people's ability to accept it was not good enough. However, this thing couldn't be done. Even with the imperial edict there was no way. For this matter, even Empress Zhang Sun discussed with him for 3 nights, but they couldn't come up with a solution. At this time Zhang Sun Wuji and the others were also silent. This thing was very good, and this matter had been spread out early in the morning. However, after the matter of the Tang family was over, this matter was still spreading. However, there were both people who believed and people who didn't believe in it. Therefore, at this time, everyone was also very worried. If they still relied on public opinion, it would be unrealistic. The people were people who wouldn't act until they saw a rabbit. Without solid evidence, no one would make a decision easily. Moreover, it was such an important matter. This was a big matter that would determine whether they could survive the next year and whether they would starve next year. At this time, Niu Jinda floated around. Seeing that no one spoke, he said in a muffled voice, "Second Master, I think this matter should be handled by Feng Zi himself. After all, this series of things was done by him. At this time he should have a solution. Instead of blindly pondering here, why don't we ask him?" At this thought, everyone nodded and pushed this matter to Zhang Feng. After all, this was the only way to take responsibility. Even if things went wrong, they wouldn't take any risks. How could they let go of such a good thing that satisfied both sides? The most important thing was, what they didn't like the most was to burn their brains. How could Li Shimin not know what these people were up to? He just didn't expose them. In fact, he had this idea long ago, but he didn't want to rely on Zhang Feng for everything. Therefore he thought that if he could do it himself, he would do it himself. After all, at that time, even if he bragged in front of Zhang Feng, he wouldn't be so passive. At this time, a tempting smell of meat came from the kitchen door. With a crunching sound, Zhang Feng rushed out with a large amount of steaming hot dishes. Red braised pork is here. Chapter 1458. Red braised pork? In an instant, Li Shimin and the others' eyes were attracted by the bright red thing on Zhang Feng's plate. It even had a sparkling luster. As the plate fell, everyone's eyes were fixed on the fist-sized piece of meat in the dustpan-sized plate in a daze. "Well, Feng, is this the red braised pork you mentioned?" Qing Yaojin's eyes widened. As he spoke, he couldn't help but pick up a piece from the plate with his chopsticks and was about to stuff it into his mouth. When Wei Jing saw this, he was stunned and coughed. Qing Yaojin suddenly came to his senses and hurriedly handed the fist-sized piece of meat to Li Shimin. Li Shimin twitched the corner of his mouth. He looked at Wei Jing with a strange look and said with a smile, "Old Wei, try it first." Seeing this, Zhang Feng instantly made a strange sound from between his teeth. "Well, I feel that you all dislike it?" Qing Yaojin smiled and said, "What are you talking about?" How could Zhang Feng not know what these people were thinking? They were obviously looking at the strange color of the red braised meat. Moreover, it was so big and fat. They definitely did not want to eat it. He couldn't help but sigh. Damn it. When did they become so crafty? In the past, these people would even eat the big pieces of white meat without salt after they were cooked in water. How did they become like this? Zhang Feng rolled his eyes and didn't bother to care. "It's up to you. If you don't want to eat, I'll eat more." While speaking, Zhang Feng turned and went into the kitchen. He took out a few bowls of millet rice again and started to eat and drink. The meat was very fat. Zhang Feng chose the best pork belly from the pig. There was no white sugar in this era, so Zhang Feng could only use that kind of native honey to color it. Then he added soy sauce to color it. So at this time, although it looked bright red, there was also some caramel color and a black color. The rich, oily feeling of the honey and the fat of the pork instantly made the meat look full of fat. At this time, at the dining table. In addition, everyone had doubts before. At this time, seeing Zhang Feng eating so happily and the tempting smell of the red braised pork itself, how could they resist? Li Shimin saw that no one was eating. He looked at the meat in the bowl and then at Wei Jing. Wei Jing couldn't even pretend not to see it. He had to obey. From Li Shimin's bowl, he respectfully picked up a piece of meat the size of a fist and put it into his bowl. After looking at it for a long time, he carefully took a bite. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Zhang Feng's cooking skills. Every time, the food that Zhang Feng made was unparalleled in the world. However, only this time, the meat looked greasy and unbearable. Qing Yaojin couldn't wait. He was very hungry. At this time, when he saw Zhang Feng eating happily and the temptation of the meat's fragrance, before Wei Jing ate, Qing Yaojin picked up a piece and ate it in big mouthfuls. For a moment, everyone's eyes couldn't help but fall on Qing Yaojin's beard, and the oil that dripped down from his beard onto his chest. They were stunned. At first, everyone saw that Qing Yaojin was eating seriously with a frown on his face. They thought that this thing was unpalatable. But slowly they found a problem. This guy didn't even finish one piece. There were already 7 or 8 pieces piled up in his bowl. Niu Jinda and Yu Qigong, who were sitting on both sides of Qing Yaojin, were the first to find the problem. Seeing Qing Yaojin eating so happily, they couldn't help but start eating as well. In an instant, the 3 of them ate quickly. Li Shimin couldn't help but twitch his eyelids. Whether it was Dr. Sun or the imperial physician, they had told him to avoid meat and fish. But at this time, seeing the 3 of them eating without a trace of table manners, he was eager to eat. Seeing this, Qing Yaojin hurriedly said, "Second master, I've eaten. This thing is delicious." Li Shimin, who was about to eat, heard this. How could he eat? With a sigh, he picked up the ordinary food on the table and ate. Zhang Feng couldn't help but look at Li Shimin with some surprise and asked, "Lao Li, are you really not going to try it?" While speaking, Zhang Feng took a bite of the red braised meat. The grease in Li Shimin's eyes and under Zhang Feng's bite splashed everywhere. Li Shimin's scalp tingled. He twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "I'm not feeling well recently. You shouldn't eat too greasy things. More." Zhang Feng glanced at Li Shimin suspiciously, and then looked at Wei Zheng and others who lowered their heads to eat the red braised meat. He didn't bother to ask. He lowered his head and competed with them. Li Shimin was so angry that he couldn't bear it. However, at this point, everyone could only eat while persuading Li Shimin not to eat meat. Li Shimin was very angry. During the meal, Li Shimin was very unhappy. Fortunately, in the end, Zhang Feng still had a conscience. He picked his teeth and took out a plate of red braised meat from the kitchen again. He glanced at Li Shimin and said, "Don't worry and eat. Although this thing looks a little greasy, you can try it. It's definitely not as greasy as you think." Seeing this, Li Shimin was still a little suspicious, but he still picked up a piece with suspicion. In an instant, the rich fragrance in his mouth made Li Shimin sink in an instant. For a moment, Li Shimin was very angry. It turned out that these people's persuasion was not true. They just wanted to eat more. Anger. Sometimes it could really turn into a ruthless fighting force. Li Shimin didn't eat now. He directly moved the plate of red braised meat in front of him. He tasted it slowly and tasted the wine carefully. Qing Yaojin and others were about to go crazy. They didn't stand on ceremony and went directly to Zhang Feng's kitchen to search. Zhang Feng was so scared that he hurriedly blocked the kitchen door and said, "Just eat enough. Aren't you tired of it?" Qing Yaojin wiped the grease at the corner of his mouth and was about to push Zhang Feng aside. He laughed and said, "How can we have enough of this thing? I say if you have more, quickly take it out. I'm going to faint from hunger." Zhang Feng rolled his eyes. "No. If you want to eat, wait until next time." Chapter 1459. After the meal, everyone was still longing for more. They didn't feel anything when they were eating, but when they stopped, the taste of oil coming out of their throats was really uncomfortable. After drinking a pot of tea, only then did they pick their teeth and rub their bellies. They lay in Zhang Feng's living room and smoked as they looked at Zhang Feng, sizing him up from head to toe. Zhang Feng felt a little scared and asked quickly, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Li Shimin smiled and said, "Nothing. I just want to ask, how do you plan to deal with the phosphate fertilizer incident?" The alarm in Zhang Feng's heart instantly went off. He didn't know what was going on. Now when he saw Lao Li smile, he felt scared. He didn't know why. Maybe he was really cheated badly? He looked at the others and saw that they all had the same expression. Zhang Feng instantly felt that this matter was far from being that simple. But it had already happened. What could he say? He could only say subconsciously, "Actually, I've said this before. The people of the Tang family can apply what they have learned. How can we forget this old profession?" Li Shimin's expression froze. Fang Shenling hurriedly said, "It's not like that. Although everything can be tested now, the people are not fools. Besides, this phosphate fertilizer is related to whether the people will have enough to eat next year or not. So we went to check. At this time, not to mention other places, even in Chang, and although most people believe it, the people who intend to use this are very few. They just don't believe in this thing. They only believe in what has been passed down from generation to generation." Zhang Feng was also a little surprised. This thing, even an imperial edict, would not work. It was the same reason that people in Guangzhou were not allowed to eat noodles. Could you prevent them from eating noodles all day long? What a joke. Since the Emperor of Hanwu, no one dared to do so for many years. Now that the Emperor had opened up a way to spread the word, how could they do such a thing? Just like the noodle food, the phosphate fertilizer could be popularized. He had to come up with a perfect plan. Otherwise, what was the point of doing this? With this in mind, Zhang Feng asked, "Why don't we do it ourselves first? After the spring harvest, won't the people all believe us?" Speaking of which, Li Shimin instantly lost his composure. Not to mention that he was not a businessman. Even if he was destined not to do such a thing. At that time, the people would be starving. Who would buy things? Even if they did, they would only buy food to fill their stomachs. Once a person went crazy, they would not care about anything else. Another thing was that Zhang Feng kept saying that there would be a locust plague next year. Although he did not believe it, he had to believe it. At the very least, there was no conclusive evidence to prove that there would be no locust plague next year. Because the locust eggs in the fields, the ones dug out from the imperial garden and thrown into the lake to feed the fish, and the fried locust eggs that he was eating now, all indicated that next year's locust plague would be even more terrifying than this year's. He had asked Yuan Tiangang for advice on this matter more than once. Yuan Tiangang also spent 30 days to calculate that there would be a catastrophe next year. Therefore, at this time, after hearing Zhang Feng's words, Li Shimin shook his head and said, No. You also said that there will be a locust plague next year. This autumn planting is related to the people in the world. If we are the only ones planting, won't we become the target of public criticism? Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin with some surprise and said, Yo, I didn't know that Lao Li could think so much. Li Shimin's eyelids twitched. He knew that this kid was insulting him, but for the people in the world, what could he do? He had to say, in fact, this matter is very easy to understand. Don't insult me. I am a businessman. My purpose is to make money. Think about it. If the people can live and work in peace and contentment, doesn't it mean that their lives will be more prosperous? Once they are rich, won't we earn more? If everyone revolves around 3 meals a day, who will have the mood to buy and sell things? Who are we going to sell our stuff to then? Who will have the strength to work for us? Zhang Feng heard this and nodded, but then he asked with a smile, was the braised pork just now delicious? Zhang Feng's brain circuit made several people's heads unable to wrap around it in an instant. They looked at Zhang Feng with a confused face. Zhang Feng saw this and said, what I mean is, was the braised pork just now delicious? Li Shimin couldn't figure out what Zhang Feng meant, but to be honest, the braised pork was indeed delicious. He nodded and said, the taste is good, but does it have anything to do with what we are discussing at this time? Yes. Zhang Feng nodded and pointed to several people and said, just now before you ate, did you shift the blame to each other? Only Old Chin didn't say anything and chose to believe me. Why is that? That's because Old Chin was hungry and really believed that I wouldn't harm him. Also, this is pork. You have eaten it before. In addition, I am your brother, so you believe me. However, you, Lao Li, Old Fong, both of you hesitated for a long time before starting to eat. Also, when you were eating, you kept persuading Lao Li to eat less. What do you mean by that? Actually, you are right. This thing looks really greasy, and for Lao Li, it's really not good to eat too much of it. You have been living a luxurious life all year round, so naturally you will more or less have some taboos. In addition, a few days ago, I happened to hear Old Sun mention that your body should avoid greasy food. But in the end, you still couldn't resist the desire for good food, so, Zhang Feng sighed helplessly and said, this is equivalent to the current situation. Even if you believe in it, there are still many people who have a doubtful attitude towards this thing. How do you think this thing should be promoted? Chapter 1460. Zhang Feng used the meal to explain the current situation based on everyone's actions. In an instant, Li Shimin and the others were shocked. The current situation was indeed as Zhang Feng said. Although many people chose to believe it, it was all based on Zhang Feng's accumulated reputation, Zhang Feng's good reputation, and Sun Simiao's incident on the street of Chang'an. Even so, the inherent thinking that had been inherited for thousands of years was still not easily surpassed. This meant that it would take a long time for this phosphate fertilizer to be popularized. But at this time, did Li Shimin still have time? No. So at this time, when he heard Zhang Feng say so, Li Shimin became more anxious. To put it bluntly, this was actually a contest between the common people, a confrontation with the traditional thinking and habits of hundreds and thousands of years. What Zhang Feng said before was actually right. As long as the food they planted was taken out, it would be enough. This matter could be easily solved. But now, did Li Shimin have a choice? Did he still have time to make a choice? There was nothing else. So at this time, Li Shimin was more anxious. He couldn't wait. At that time when the people of the entire Tang Dynasty were not there, Li Shimin's eyebrows were so deep that they were like fried dough twists. He walked around in the living room and thought. After a long time, Li Shimin said, Fengzi, we really don't have a little idea. If you have a way, you can tell us. And just now we have discussed for a long time. If we use the previous method to do it, words alone are useless. Even if we ask for an imperial edict, it will be useless. Think about it, every citizen has their own way of thinking. This phosphate fertilizer is a little unimaginable. How can these people change their way of thinking in such a short period of time? Alas, everyone was silent. At this time, Zhang Sun Wuji said with some hesitation, Didn't young Master Li bring the malt just now? If we get some malt and take it to Chang'an City and let the people have a look, will it? After that, Zhang Sun Wuji stared at Li Shimin and Zhang Feng. Seeing that they seemed to be thinking, he hurriedly said, This is just my guess. You can take it as a joke. No. Zhang Feng hurriedly waved his hand and said, Your method is really good, but it will waste my 1 mu of grain. Li Shimin's eyes lit up when he heard that. Yes. Why didn't I think of such a simple thing? Look, Fengzi. If we waste the wheat in the field, although it seems to be a waste now, as long as we take the sprouts to the emperor or go to the political announcing palace, there will be a turn for the better. At that time we can put the wheat in the field in a frame and take it to Chang'an City to let the people have a look at it. Won't that work? And the most important thing is that these things will not be lost. When the time comes, wheat seedlings will grow. It's just that they will grow in the frame of Chang'an City instead of in the field. This will stimulate the sales of phosphate fertilizer. What do you think? Fang Xianling glanced at the emperor and Zhang Feng with some hesitation, and then quietly glanced at Du Ruhui, who was calm and collected, and said, Old Du, do you think this will work? Du Ruhui glanced at them and smiled faintly. Fengzi has already planned it. Why are you and I worrying about it? Fang Xianling was stunned. What do you mean? It's very simple. That is, today during the meal, Zhang Feng has already thought of a countermeasure. This red braised meat, do you think Fengzi will give it to us for free? Although this meat looks ordinary, we will only know its taste after eating it. Just like the food Fengzi made before, at the beginning, it was so ordinary because we were used to it. Even if Fengzi made something, it would feel ordinary. But what does it mean to outsiders? This is a factor that can completely change the food culture of the entire Chang'an. So, this red braised meat is actually Fengzi's way of telling us that he has a plan? Fang Xianling asked in surprise. Du Ruhui narrowed his eyes and nodded. He looked at Zhang Feng with mixed feelings and said, That's right. Actually, Zhang Feng had already thought of this seed long ago. He wanted to spread it out. After all, he bought so much land. Naturally, he wanted to let the people of Tonghui Lane plant it. However, he was hesitant about whether he should do so. He didn't have a fixed number. That's why he wanted to use the red braised pork to talk about Second Master's thoughts. Yes. In an instant, Fang Xianling suddenly understood and whispered with Du Ruhui. The next moment, Qing Yaojin and others also joined in the whisper. Li Shimin and Zhang Feng had noticed, but the problem now was that Zhang Feng was still hesitating whether to destroy the wheat in that mu of land. After all, that was where his hope lay. Once there was a problem, all the plans would be ruined. That was why Zhang Feng was so hesitant. At this time, seeing Fang Xianling and others, although they could faintly hear some, they still couldn't hear clearly. After looking at Li Shimin, Zhang Feng nodded and said, Actually, I have another plan, but I'm a little worried. What if it fails? Chapter 1461. Li Shimin was also anxious. The longer the matter was delayed, the shorter the autumn planting time would be. Seeing that Zhang Feng was still hesitating, he hurriedly asked, Tell us about it. There are so many of us here, surely we can think of a way, right? Seeing that Li Shimin was a little anxious at this time, Fang Xianling and the others also hurriedly shut up and tried to persuade Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng then said hesitantly, Then I'll say it? Say it. There are no outsiders here. Seeing that, Zhang Feng said, Actually, this matter is very easy to deal with. I plan to put all the wheat in transparent glass jars. I don't need a lot, just a few seeds. The main thing is to expose them so that others can see them. Secondly, I want to settle the matter of the seeds first. As for the phosphorus fertilizer, it's actually possible to do it later. As you all know, there are as many locust eggs as there are hairs on a cow. This is also the reason why I want to cover the wheat seeds with a layer of grass ash. As long as the people know the function of screening the seeds and the benefits, the next step is to make the pesticide. When the time comes, I plan to add water and dilute the phosphate fertilizer in the water. The effect is actually the same. This way, even if the autumn planting season is over, the wheat seeds will not be affected at all. Zhang Feng actually had this idea for a long time. Regarding the pesticide, after Dr. Sun went up the mountain last time, He had been working on it with Dr. Sunday. However, he really did not know how to promote this pesticide matter. After all, this thing was only to prevent the locust eggs in the field. No one knew what would happen. Therefore, until now, Zhang Feng had been thinking. He originally wanted to wait for Li Gan and the others to finish the water wheel installation before seeing the situation. At this time, Old Sun said this idea. This made Zhang Feng even more hesitant. After all, the pesticide matter was very important. If it was not handled well, anyone who drank a mouthful would die. In addition, the hidden danger of the phosphate fertilizer poisoning incident had not been completely eliminated. If this thing appeared again, it would definitely be used against them. However, Zhang Feng didn't notice that when he was talking about the pesticide, Li Shimin and the others' eyes almost popped out. After Zhang Feng finished speaking, Li Shimin hurriedly interrupted Zhang Feng and asked, "Feng Zi, what is this pesticide that you are talking about?" "It's a medicine that can kill locusts. It's a medicine that can solve the disease of wheat from the roots. It's the same as the medicine we take when we're sick. However, this thing is poisonous. I'm afraid it will cause big trouble when the time comes. That's why I'm hesitating. Should I get this thing out?" Zhang Feng thought for a while and rubbed his forehead in distress. F***ck, let's not talk about this for now. Let's deal with the seeds and phosphate fertilizer first. Then I'll ask Elder Sun about the pesticide. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Li Shimin made Zhang Feng dumbfounded. At this time, seeing that Zhang Feng didn't want to talk about it, everyone didn't ask anything. They could only wait for Zhang Feng to talk about it himself. Moreover, the phosphate fertilizer matter had not been dealt with yet. Even if the pesticide was hyped up to the sky, it would be useless. Feng Zi, then tell me. The most important thing is to deal with the seeds first, or the phosphate fertilizer? Yes, you should come up with a plan first. There are so many of us. We will definitely think of something. You can't just wait like this. We have to come up with a plan, right? Whether it works or not, we'll only know after we try it first. Zhang Feng thought for a while and finally rubbed his head. Stop arguing. Can we analyze it first? Zhang Feng was really annoyed. The people of this era regarding these things were simply, this was just the beginning. What if his science and technology department wanted to do something else in the future? Wouldn't that pierce through the sky? It was no longer a matter of promoting phosphate fertilizers. The problem now was, how to make the people believe in this thing. The potato matter would start after the Chinese New Year next year. At this time, the Tang Dynasty only had corn, which was millet, and wheat. These things were too simple. It was not difficult to increase the production. They just had to improve the quality of the seeds and then screen out the good ones. Then they would cultivate them. It was the same principle as cultivating good breeding pigs. These things would eventually be spread out and made available to the people. Otherwise, why would he make these things? Plant them himself? Wouldn't that be tiring? In fact, according to Zhang Feng's temper, he really didn't want to make these things available. In this pedantic era, making these things was simply courting death. Why should he waste so much effort? In the end, it was nothing. Since the Han Dynasty, there were so many good things such as the plow, the water wheel, and so on. So many good things. These things were slowly worn out in the long river of time. The root cause was that people in this era were too pedantic. Otherwise, how could it be like this? The era was developing, but because of the monopoly of the aristocratic families, the pedantic of the people, and the lack of attention of the people in the current dynasty, such a sad thing happened. This was the case at this time. If he came up with a plan to produce more than 2,000 caddies of potatoes per moo in the super rice, wouldn't the world be turned upside down? Therefore, Zhang Feng was certain that if he wanted to change all of this, he had to change their thinking first. Otherwise, everything would be in vain. It wasn't the fault of the common people, nor was it Zhang Feng's fault, nor was it the fault of the great Tang's nobles. It was this era that was sick. If he wanted to change all of this, he had to cure it first. However, what could Zhang Feng do to cure this era? Chapter 1462. The era was sick. This was something that no one could quickly cure. This could only be changed gradually from the most fundamental point. For example, if Zhang Feng really produced potatoes now, not to mention others, even Lao Li and the others would subconsciously think that Zhang Feng was crazy. Not to mention others. In this era, in an era where one could only produce 100 caddies per moo, who would believe that there was something that could produce 2,000 to 3,000 caddies per moo? Even ghosts wouldn't believe it, right? This was the drawback of this era. Only when this thing was really accepted by people slowly, such as this phosphate fertilizer, could the people really see its practical use and the matter of the seeds. Only when it was accepted by them, then everything would happen. Otherwise, Zhang Feng was very clear about the principle of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm. As for whether other people in this era knew about it, he wasn't sure. In short, everything could only be done with practical actions. That would be the best medicine. The best medicine to cure this era. At this moment, Li Shimin and the others were also silent, but in everyone's mind they were also thinking. They weren't real businessmen. For this matter they would think more deeply. Zhang Feng had always been indifferent to this matter. He didn't care about it, but when it was really important he would show seriousness. However, they really hadn't seen a situation like today. For example, the gunpowder, the firearms and so on. Zhang Feng was always so calm. When did he become so serious today? At this moment, Zhang Feng was silent for a long time. The cigarette almost burned the skin off his mouth. Then he said, "For this matter, I think that the seeds and the phosphate fertilizer can be used at the same time. First, we can use public opinion to create public opinion. It's best to send people to bring the method of screening the seeds and the phosphate fertilizer to the various prefectures to publicize. Then I will ask people to make some glass bottles and get some of the sprouted wheat." Hearing Zhang Feng's words, Li Shimin hurriedly sat beside Zhang Feng and asked, "Fengzi, are you going to use the two-step method?" In fact, the phosphate fertilizer incident has already caused a sensation in Chang and the surrounding prefectures. However, there is no physical evidence, so Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin's shoulder and said, "Yes." But with the previous public opinion, even the person who spread the rumors didn't believe it himself. How could he make others believe it? Weren't you guys asking why I bought so much land? Actually, there is some selfishness in this aspect, but most of it is because at this time, many people's eyes are focused on the mountain. If we don't do something, what will the people think? Now that we're buying land, it's only natural that people will notice. When Li Shimin heard this, he was instantly surprised. Could it be that all of this was your plan? You mean, buying land? How could there be so many excuses? Li Shimin also wanted to know the real purpose of Zhang Feng's purchase of these lands. At this time, when Zhang Feng mentioned it, Li Shimin instantly felt that something big was going to happen. After all, this matter, if he didn't handle it well today and didn't understand the details, there would definitely be people who would use this matter to impeach Zhang Feng in the morning assembly tomorrow. Seeing this, Zhang Feng glanced at Li Shimin and said, "Yes, it's what you think. I'm buying land. Do you really think I want to farm? Do you think I, Zhang Feng, am someone who likes to farm? If Zhang Feng was a farmer, then he wouldn't be so lazy. This guy, to put it bluntly, was a lazy guy. He was so lazy that he didn't even eat well. If he put his heart into teaching others, would he farm? Go and beg. If anyone really believed it, then they must be bewitched." Li Shimin pointed to the sky outside with a headache and said, "Hurry up, it's going to be dark soon. How am I going to enter the city?" When Zhang Feng heard this, he said, "Actually, this matter is also very troublesome for me. After all, now we're facing all the people and the pair of people behind the scenes. No one knows what's waiting for us. At this time, the best way is to take 3 steps. The first step is to let people take the seeds and spread rumors in the city. After all, at this time, the city has naturally been abuzz with the news that I'm buying land, but no one knows why I'm buying land. It's best to spread the news about the seeds now. Then, when these people spread the rumors, they will definitely secretly buy land. Do you believe it? As long as they take action, what does that mean? It means that the matter is confirmed. After all, these people are all from Chang'an City. They see each other often and naturally know many people. Previously they were only shouting slogans, but people realized that they didn't do anything behind the scenes. How many people do you think will believe it?" Li Shimin frowned slightly, but his eyes lit up in an instant. Zhang Feng is right. Why didn't I think of it? If I had thought of this in the first place, then, at this time, Li Shimin said enthusiastically, "Hurry up and say it." Zhang Feng leaned back on the recliner and stretched comfortably. Then he said, "This thing is a psychological effect. This time we don't need them to say anything, we need them to do something." "What is this called?" "This is called the door god making a fortune. Only these people will use practical actions. It's more practical than 100,000 people shouting slogans on the street. This is psychological warfare." Chapter 1463. This time Li Shimin was aghast. Psychological warfare. This was the second time Zhang Feng mentioned this matter. Previously, no one had thought that psychological warfare could be used to this extent. In their memory, psychological warfare, except for the enemy and the means used on businessmen, seemed to be useless at other times. Sometimes it was the emperor's privilege. But now, Zhang Feng actually said that it could be used in this aspect? This, in an instant, everyone couldn't stay calm. What did this mean? This was simply, how terrifying. Li Shimin couldn't help but ask, Fengzi, what do you mean? Tell me, what do you want to do? This psychological warfare can be used in this way? Zhang Feng nodded, that's right. To put it bluntly, anyone can use psychological tactics at any time. For example, when you are buying or selling things, or when you are trying to get something useful from others. These are all useful. And this time, the psychological warfare is actually to spread the news about the phosphate fertilizer to her. For example, think about the current situation. Those who heard it are sick of it, and those who talked about it are sick of it. Instead of that, why don't we use this as a method? Li Shimin stared and said, how do you want to do it? Zhang Feng smiled mysteriously and then grinned. In fact, it's very simple. We just use what we are doing now to let it spread naturally. We don't need to publicize anything, we just need to let those who are preparing to spread this matter do it in their own way, such as asking for the phosphate fertilizer and the method of screening seeds. In this way, those who are observing them will instantly know what they are doing. What we need is actually a sense of mystery. This. Li Shimin could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Sense of mystery. Wasn't this just about spreading the phosphate fertilizer? How did it become a sense of mystery? What did this mean? Involuntarily, Li Shimin looked at Wei Zheng and asked, Old Wei, what do you think Fengzi means? Is this the legendary saying that gossip is fearful? Instantly, Li Shimin thought of everything. To put it bluntly, they wanted to use a method to let the people discover the mystery instead of telling them about it one by one. Seeing this, Li Shimin's expression changed. He suddenly thought of some things that he was familiar with. If that was the case, then why not just let this matter be settled this way? It seemed that, it really did have some uses. Li Shimin took a deep breath and said, Fengzi, tell me about your arrangements. I'll get someone to do it immediately. When Zhang Feng heard this, he gently pressed Li Shimin's shoulder and said, Don't be anxious. It doesn't matter if it's a day later or a day earlier. It's just that we have to wait for the right opportunity. When Qing Yaojin heard this, he slapped his thigh and said, Oh, Fengzi, just tell me about it. Why are you beating around the bush? Just tell me what you're going to do. Isn't that enough? If you want people, I'll find a few hundred brothers for you now. Isn't it just buying land? I'll go and do something big for him now. What do you think? When Zhang Feng saw this, he speechlessly stared at Qing Yaojin and said, I say, can you not be so silly? We're not going to the battlefield to kill the enemy, nor are we going to dry up. If you do so much, you'll only make things worse. Just wait and see. Let this matter brew for a while. We don't need too many people. Just a small number of people will stir up this matter. And what we need to do is, wait. Wait? Li Shimin and the others were even more confused. They hurriedly asked, Fengzi, what do you mean? Just waiting. When they can't hold it in anymore, when Niu Weili takes the initiative to drive out the people who bought the land, it's time for us to act. Qing Yaojin was so anxious that he scratched his ears and cheeks. If he was asked to charge into the battlefield, he could do it. But if it was a conspiracy, he really couldn't do it. He could only sit down and smoke a cigarette sullenly. Li Shimin frowned and said, Old Qin, don't be so impatient. Fengzi naturally has his reasons for this arrangement. Let's hear him out first. In fact, this matter was very easy to understand. After all, this matter was just like this. It was just to let these people see for themselves whether this was the case or not. When Li Shimin saw that they had all quieted down, he said, You see, if there's anything else you need. If you need manpower or any preparations, just tell me. I'll go and prepare now. How about it? There's no need. You just need to reap the benefits. As for the rest, we'll talk about it when the time comes. That's it? Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng with some surprise. Zhang Feng nodded and said, In fact, isn't it just like this? Let the matter ferment on its own. What else can we do? Chapter 1464. After waiting for a long time, Li Shimin suddenly realized that Zhang Feng had been talking for a long time, but it was the same as not talking at all. If this matter was left to ferment naturally, then why did they have to spend so much effort here? What was the point? At the thought of this, Li Shimin felt like he was in Tesco. With a headache, he patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and said, Fengzi, why don't I go back first? You think about it and see how to deal with this matter. I'll go back first. Zhang Feng was stunned. Didn't we talk about it clearly? Just go back and wait for the news. Alright, ask someone to bring some malt seeds back. When the time comes, these things will have an unexpected effect. Li Shimin did not want to stay for a moment longer. This matter was too tiring. After staying for so long, no one expected that Zhang Feng would give such an answer. How could Li Shimin not be speechless? There were a lot of things to do in the court now. If not for the fact that this matter was the most important thing to solve these problems, they would not have come. Autumn planting was too important. In fact, to put it bluntly, they came here this time to completely solve the problem of autumn planting. Once these problems were solved, they would know how to deal with everything in the future. After all, food was the king's path. Once he had food, Li Shimin would be able to attack the Turks if he wanted to. If he wanted to exterminate the 5 clans and 7 clans, he would be able to do so in the blink of an eye, and he wouldn't cause the slightest disturbance in the imperial court. Only by controlling food could one control the lifeline of a country and the direction of a country's national destiny. At this time, Li Shimin felt that Zhang Feng's words were too incredible. What kind of problem could be solved in such a simple situation? Previously, many spies were sent out, but there was no way to make the people accept this thing. Now, they only needed to do nothing and it would work? In any case, regardless of whether others believed it or not, Li Shimin really did not believe that this thing could be so simple. Li Shimin left. Along the way, they took away 3 large carts of wheat seeds that had sprouted. These seeds were basically removed from the soil on the wheat seeds. Together with the soil, they were placed on the carts and then carefully carried down the mountain by 4 imperial guards. Let's not talk about the reactions of the people from White Deer College. Just the merchants in Shao Mountain Market were scared out of their wits by this scene. No one knew what was going on. They also didn't know what had happened on the mountain for them to bring so much land down the mountain. Is there no more soil at the foot of the mountain? Or was there something different about this soil? All of a sudden, all the people in the marketplace of Mount Ji exploded. Like a frying pan, they swarmed around the imperial guards who were disguised as guards. They wanted to see what was on the handcart. However, before they could even get close, under the sharpness of the MO sabers, everyone became timid. The next moment, all kinds of rumors and slanders began to circulate in the marketplace. Yesterday, I heard from the workers in Tonghui Square that the dean came up with something new on the mountain. Today, those noble young masters are tinkering with something in the villa area on the mountain and by the big lake. In a short while, this news spread and brewed in the marketplace. Not long after, the incident of Zhang Feng frying fish in the lake last time was also exposed. Last time, 5 days ago, there were waves of thunder on the mountain. Do you still remember? At this moment, in front of the fermented rice wine stall, a strong man was eating fermented rice wine as he looked at the long line and said. In an instant, everyone looked over and asked anxiously, "When did this happen? Why didn't we know about it?" The strong man rolled his eyes and pointed at the gate of the academy. "Go talk to the guards there and you'll know everything. 5 days ago, didn't the dean invite all the students of the academy to a banquet? You all know about it, right?" Hearing this, everyone nodded. The incident last time was too big, so many people knew about it. After all, the fact that the dean invited the entire academy to eat fish caused a great sensation at that time. The most important thing was that the fish was blown out of the lake by the dean in a magical way. He let the fish jump to the shore by themselves. Isn't it magical? This time. In an instant, everyone gasped. At this moment, when they looked at those people carrying the handcart, there was a touch of horror in their eyes. Then someone asked, "Then do you think this soil is the same thing used to get fish last time?" The strong man shook his head, pointed down the mountain and said, "Are you stupid? How could this be that thing? I think this should be related to the land that the dean went to buy today." In an instant, someone couldn't help but exclaim, "Are you talking about phosphate fertilizer? The dean is going to get the phosphate fertilizer down the mountain? F***CK. Seems, it's very likely." For a moment, the people in the marketplace were no longer in the mood to do business. They all wanted to go up and see if there was phosphate fertilizer in it. After all, when they were at the foot of the mountain today, the students on the mountain had shown how to extract phosphate fertilizer. That was to say, this thing, it was either related to phosphate fertilizer or it was real phosphate fertilizer. There was no doubt about it. Chapter 1465. The handcart was not big. It only had the appearance of a normal handcart. However, at this moment, the handcart was moving slowly on the flat cement ground, as if it was afraid that the dirt on the handcart would cause the slightest bump. It was moving extremely slowly. There were countless guards standing guard around the handcart. However, the more it was like this, the more the rumors spread. All the people who were doing business in the market came over one after another. They even forgot about the shiny MO swords in their hands. The blade was very cold. However, for all the people who had hope in their hearts at this moment, this was nothing. At the very least, today they could get what they dreamed of in their hearts. Phosphor fertilizer. Although they did not know if this thing could really increase the food supply, and if it was really as miraculous as the dean said, This thing could only be known when it was in their hands. Moreover, the most important thing was, at this moment, on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain, the news that the dean had gone to buy land was spreading like wildfire. What was this? This was the biggest doubt. Why would the dean buy so much land at this time? The curiosity of people was really like what Zhang Feng said, endless. Under the strong curiosity, everyone wanted to know whether these things were real or fake. This made Qing Yaojin, who was leading the team, could not help but sigh with emotion. Then the footsteps slowed down again. At this moment, the people in the market looked at the handcarts and discussed animatedly. However, for some unknown reason, the speed of the entire convoy suddenly slowed down completely. It was also at this moment that a trace of chaos appeared in the originally calm convoy. The horse in one of the carriages seemed to be frightened, and backed up a little, instantly neighing. The next moment, the entire carriage trembled. This trembling did not matter, but the whole thing in the carriage also trembled instantly. Rustling. Under the shocked gazes of all the people, the thing behind the carriage fell to a corner. In the next moment, the carriage seemed to have not noticed and continued to move forward. After waiting for the entire convoy to leave, the commoners hurriedly followed behind. At a glance, however, no one dared to touch the fallen soil as if there was something terrifying in the soil. One had to know that there were people who had died from phosphate fertilizer poisoning. In addition, when they were experimenting with phosphate fertilizer, they used a white thing to cover their mouths and noses. The rumor that it was poisonous was not groundless. How could this not make everyone curious and anxious? At this moment, a burly man squeezed through the crowd and stuck his head out to take a look. Then he waved his hand and said, "Everyone disperse. Let me take a look at what this thing is." As he spoke, not only did the crowd not retreat, they even surrounded him even more tightly. Although the burly man spoke casually, he was already lying like a dog in his heart. However, he could only brace himself and use a stick to gently dig at the pile of dirt. However, this soil seemed to be no different from normal soil. It was simply the most common soil in the field. Why were these people so careful when carrying this soil? Everyone was dumbfounded. "Oh my God! Look, what is that?" At this moment, an exclamation was heard. In an instant, the burly man was so frightened that his whole body trembled. He shouted angrily behind him, "What are you shouting about? Can't you see that I'm fiddling with it? No, look right in front of your stick. What's that green thing?" Huh? For a moment, although the burly man was a little angry, he still subconsciously looked at the wooden stick in his hand and then at the crowd behind him. He saw that the eyes of the people surrounding him were fixed on it, as if there was something extraordinary in front of his stick. He couldn't help but be even more dumbfounded. He scratched his head and forced down the panic in his heart. "Isn't this just the soil in the ground? Look at how scared you are," I thought. In an instant, the moment he finished speaking, his eyes also saw something in the soil in front of his stick. There really seemed to be something. That thing was very small, very thin. If one did not look carefully, no one would be able to see it. However, in this yellow soil, that tender green thing that was much thicker than a strand of hair was extremely eye-catching. It was a malt. This thing. No one would be mistaken. But, such a thick malt was really rare. In addition, what time was it now? Even if it started on the day of the autumn planting sacrifice, it had only been 10 days until now. Who could make the malt sprout at this time? At this moment, the burly man's hands trembled as he carefully peeled off the soil under the malt, and then revealed the root wrapped in black and gray grass ash the size of a soybean. This time, everyone was even more confused. Everyone recognized this thing. It was the grass ash that they were most familiar with. But why did it appear here? And how could it? They could not help it. The burly man, with trembling hands, held the ball of grass ash in his hand as if holding a treasure, and then gently peeled off the grass ash outside. The next moment, a golden yellow seed was revealed. This. Everyone could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. They exclaimed, "Oh my God! How is this possible? How can wheat be planted in such a way? Could it be that these handcarts carry such things?" Chapter 1466. For a moment, everyone's eyes were wide open. Those who were closer and bolder also went forward and rummaged through the mud on the ground. A moment later, someone dug out countless germinated wheat seeds from the ground. At this moment, everyone was shocked. They held the wheat in their hands excitedly and cheered as if they had found a treasure. "It's true. It's true. Phosphate fertilizer, is this the function of phosphate fertilizer? Ha ha ha." After people in the market of Shao Mountain discovered the secret of the soil, the news spread out like a storm in the market. The people. They were all pedantic and extremely stubborn. In their minds, this seemed to be the most normal thing. It was as if the heavens were looking out for them. That was why they discovered the big secret of White Deer College. In an instant, people in the entire G Mountain market became restless one after another. Some people didn't even care about their stalls. They hurriedly packed up and ran to Chang'an City. Some people even wrapped their stalls in straw mats, clamped them under their armpits and ran up the mountain in a hurry. Going up the mountain now was undoubtedly the best chance to see Zhang Feng. It was also the best chance to know the secret of making wheat germinate in 10 days. This was the most important thing for the people. At least, this thing. It was a hard currency that could fill their stomachs next year and prevent them from starving to death. Report. Out of Shao Mountain Market. Qing Yaojin's spies didn't stop. They reported everything that happened in Shao Mountain Market to Qing Yaojin in detail. General, someone is going up the mountain to beg the dean. Report. General, someone is going to buy land from the Chang and local government like the dean. Report. Someone sent the news to Chang'an City. As the news came in one by one, Qing Yaojin took a deep puff of his cigarette and waved his hand lightly. The next moment, the entire fleet slowly stopped moving forward. Seeing this, Qing Yaojin said, "Stop moving." All the soldiers who were disguised as guards were dumbfounded. Didn't His Majesty say that at this time, they should send the things to Chang'an City as soon as possible? How could this be? Qing Yaojin's personal guard could not help but remind him in a low voice, "General, His Majesty just ordered that this thing must be sent to Chang, and as soon as possible." Qing Yaojin glanced at the guard. The guard was so frightened that his body trembled and he didn't say anything else. "Pass down my orders, cook rice." The guard was dumbfounded. This time he was completely dumbfounded. The distance from Shao Mountain to Chang was less than 20 li. Moreover, they had just eaten on the mountain. It had only been 2 hours and they were eating again? However, he didn't know what Qing Yaojin wanted to do, so he could only follow his orders. There weren't many people in the team, only a little more than 100, and there were more than 30 carriages. At this time, under Qing Yaojin's command, everyone was carrying out their respective tasks in an orderly manner. As for the guard, after passing the order, he returned to Qing Yaojin's side and followed closely. Qing Yaojin took off the pouch on his body and took out a handful of wheat from his arms. He sighed and said, "This is really good stuff. Do you want to ask why we disobeyed the imperial decree?" The guard heard this and hurriedly said, "I don't dare." Qing Yaojin glanced at the guard and waved his hand saying, "Tell me. Anyway, there's still a long way to Chang'an Road." The guard couldn't help but look back. He could faintly see the outline of Chang'an City. He didn't know how to answer, so he just bit his lip and said nothing. Seeing this, Qing Yaojin slapped the guard's head hard and scolded, "Idiot, do you know why I'm doing this?" The guard was shocked and hurriedly knelt down on one knee saying, "I don't know. This thing. Although it's the emperor's decree, he didn't say when the malt should be sent to Chang'an City. Besides, that guy said that we need to let things brew for a while. Didn't we just send a message that the people in Shao Mountain have found the malt? Now you know, right? What's more, what we need now is to let things brew. Pass down the order that no one should mention this matter again. If anyone wants to go home, I'll allow him to go home today." Qing Yaojin had his own plan. Didn't Feng Zi say that he should let him brew this matter on his own? That's fine. Let's start a fire for him. As for whether the fire would burn or not, it depended on the group of people in Shao Mountain Market and how big a sensation it would cause in Chang'an City. The reason why Qing Yaojin brought these people here this time was that they were all people around Chang'an City. Early in the morning, he had received the emperor's secret order to delay as much as possible. Otherwise, how could Qing Yaojin delay like this? Wasn't he courting death? Chapter 1467. The afterglow of the setting sun was slowly sprinkling on Chang'an City. In the past, at this time, the people who were farming in the fields were returning to the city one after another. It was also the time when the businessmen were preparing to pack up and go home. However, today was different. Although the businessmen on the street had already packed up their stalls, countless people could be seen everywhere. They were whispering, and many people were even looking at the city gate as if they were waiting for something. And the most reliable source of information for the people was the storytellers in the tea houses in Chang'an. Today was the busiest day for their business. Usually at this time the storytellers would have already run away. But today was different. Everyone was spending money like water, and what they wanted to hear was what happened on the mountain. They wanted to hear about the phosphate fertilizer and the purchase of the land today. The most anticipated event was undoubtedly the Hungtong Tea House, where Blind Sun, who was famous in Chang'an City, was staying. The owner of the tea house was a woman, and she was rumored to be as beautiful as Jing Shu, the most beautiful woman in Chang'an. However, no one had seen what this woman looked like. They only knew that she was from the palace. Since this tea house was opened, few people dared to make trouble. No one dared to make trouble. Even the 4 great devils who were famous in Chang'an City had to take a detour if they came here. Today the business of the Hungtong tea house was unusually good. The entire second floor of the tea house was full of people. Even the corridor on the second floor was full of high-ranking officials and dignitaries, let alone the first floor. The people on the first floor were so crowded that they almost burst the door. There was no tea to drink and they couldn't even squeeze through. It was difficult to go to the outhouse. Who the hell cared about drinking tea? At the entrance of the tea house, the people who used to cherish money as much as their lives held up their copper plates and stood on tiptoe, looking at the door eagerly. They wanted to go in and see Blind Sunday. In the end, Hungtong Tea House had no choice but to ask Blind Sun to leave the tea house for the first time. At this time the people in the tea house all opened the windows. Some even broke the window paper for fear of missing something. Blind Sun's storytelling stall was also set up on the street in front of the Hungtong Tea House. All of a sudden the entire intersection between West and East City was filled with people. It was an airtight sea of people moving about. Blind Sun had also changed his outfit today. Beside him there was a little girl around 12 or 13 years old. Her hair was tied up in 2 braids, her hair was tied with a red string, and a red ribbon was wrapped around her waist. She was wearing an apricot robe and her cheeks were rosy. She was holding a pipa in her hands. Although she was small, she did not have any stage fright in the face of such a scene. Sitting upright on the platform, he gently played a piece of music. The storyteller's music was very particular. It was not an ordinary song. He was mainly playing along with the storytelling atmosphere, and the stories were long and passionate while the stories were low and hoarse. At this moment, the sound of the music echoed. Blind Sun clasped his hands behind his back and slowly tidied up his gray robe that was covered in puddings. Then he slowly ascended the stage. Pa! The gavel clanged. In an instant, everyone's voices quieted down. Blind Sun looked around with a solemn expression, and then said, "Today it's rare that everyone is in such a good mood. Today I believe that everyone doesn't want to listen to other things. You just want to hear what the Emperor Star on Shao Mountain has done, right? Wasn't this nonsense? Otherwise, who would come here to join in the fun when it was almost dark?" Amidst the complaints, Blind Sun said leisurely, "It's a coincidence. Just now I just found out some news. Just today 4 hours ago Mr. He Xian, the Dean of White Deer College and the youngest great scholar of the Tang Dynasty, Prince Zhang Feng, did something extraordinary on the mountain." "What did he do?" "Blind Sun, don't keep us in suspense. Just say it." "That's right. We don't have time to listen to your nonsense today. In a bit you won't be short of a single copper coin. Why don't you tell us what exactly Principal Zhang wants to do with today's matters? Is that phosphate fertilizer real or not? This matter has been going on for a long time, but no one has come out to say what the phosphate fertilizer is. If you want to say that it is useful, then we have to come up with something trustworthy, right?" In the face of everyone's questions, Blind Sun took a sip of tea and unfolded his fan. He slowly said, "What this old man wants to talk about today is actually this matter. But before that I would like to ask everyone to calm down and let me finish speaking. Is that all right?" Seeing this, everyone had to be patient and wait. This matter was too big. At this time, everyone's hearts were in a mess. Everyone was thinking about the phosphate fertilizer. After all, the people in Tonghui Fong were crazy about buying land. At this time, in Chang'an City, whether it was the rich or the ordinary people, they were all in a mess. No one was sure what Zhang Feng wanted to do by buying so much land at this time. But the only thing they knew was that after today Chang'an would definitely be in chaos. At this time, Blind Sun stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Today on the mountain, President Zhang and Mr. Xian publicized the extraction process of the phosphate fertilizer. More than 4,000 people in White Deer College witnessed the whole process. They even explained the various things to pay attention to and how to extract it clearly. That's not all. Go to the market on Shao Mountain and ask around. Today, in the market, the students on the mountain also spent 2 hours to publicly show this matter to the people at the market at the foot of the mountain." Buzz. Chapter 1468. All the people were in an uproar. Including those high-ranking officials and dignitaries on the second floor, they were all frowning. They had also heard about it. After all, Shao Mountain Market was a big fat piece of meat. Although there were only the students on the mountain with the fame of the academy in Zhangfeng, it was constantly expanding. In addition, Zhang Feng's several big industries and the cigarette industry directly attracted the businessmen from the western regions. They didn't even want to enter Chang'an City. Not only was it troublesome to enter the city, but it was also troublesome to continue. But this market was different. Although there were also Chang'an garrisons at the Shao Mountain Pass, the garrisons were not as tricky as those at the city gate. As long as you were a serious businessman, as long as you checked the route you took, and the permits from the state government were correct, you could enter. You could enter for free. It was free. And the stalls in the market were all free. No fees were charged. If you wanted to find a place to keep your stall, you only needed to go to the local government of Chang, and to apply for an approval, and then show it to the people of the academy in the market. Then you could build a house in the planned place. That was all. Even if you built a shed, no one would care. Unlike in Chang'an City. Here everyone was equal. This was the most attractive place for businessmen. Even if you were a big shot, you would still have to follow the rules when you came here. After all, this was the fief of White Deer College. No matter how arrogant you were, you had to behave here. Otherwise, you motherf asterisk cur, don't even think about entering this city square again. This was Zhang Feng's rule. Everyone had to follow it. Even if Grand Prince Li came, he would have to hand over his invitation card obediently. Therefore, basically, most of the businessmen in Chang'an City, the aristocratic families with industries and sidelines, and those high-ranking officials and dignitaries had their own businesses in this market. There was no other way. This was the way to survive. These people had already known about what had happened in the G Mountain market today. However, no one knew if it was the same on the mountain. Now that Blind Sun said this, although there were some things they couldn't figure out, at least when Blind Sun was talking, the officials and nobles on the second floor didn't interrupt. On the other hand, it was the commoners. At this moment he was even crazier. After all, the phosphor fertilizer matter had already caused a lot of noise. Because of this matter, many people were killed. Even Zhang Feng, who had always been known as a nice guy, killed people in Chang'an City when he was angry. Moreover, this matter was tacitly approved by the emperor. Did this mean that the emperor had tacitly approved the phosphate fertilizer? Moreover, I heard that Zhang Feng bought 300 hectares of land today. What kind of concept was that? Even in Chang'an City, it was only a few hundred hectares. But 300 hectares, how could the emperor not know about this? That would be strange. At this time, most of the people on the second floor had already sent the people who bought the land to the Chang'an local government, although no one had come back to reply. However, there was still a glimmer of hope. As for how big this hope was, it depended on the emperor's imperial edict tomorrow morning. Once today's matter was confirmed, all the people on the second floor had made up their minds. Even if they had to put down their faces and beg Niu Weili, whose official rank was much lower than theirs, they wouldn't refuse. And the most important part was the phosphate fertilizer. At this time, the discussions of the commoners rose and fell. That Blind Sun couldn't even speak properly. The officials and nobles on the second floor were a little angry. However, they couldn't get angry for no reason because they were putting on airs. At this time, Blind Sun was the first to get angry. With a bang, he threw the gavel and said, "Since you all know more than old man, why don't we listen to you today?" Hearing that, the people immediately became obedient. As for the attentive people on the second floor, they discovered that the window on the third floor was slowly closing. That woman was angry. At this time, the people on the second floor became more obedient. Unless it was absolutely necessary, no one dared to say anything. At this moment, Blind Sun slowly cupped his fists towards the third floor and said, "You guessed right. Young Master Zhang is a kind person. He originally planned to keep this thing for himself. Just now, I met with the old village chief of Tonghui Lane. He said that young Master Zhang Feng once said that he did so much just to let the people of Tang Empire have food to eat. Moreover, he said that young Master Zhang Feng once said that he did so much just to let the people of Tang Empire have food to eat. Moreover, they can eat their fill, wear warm clothes and not be bullied. As for this phosphate fertilizer, your guess is correct. The current emperor knows about this matter. Furthermore, during the autumn planting ceremony, the emperor had used this phosphate fertilizer on the imperial manor on Mount Longsho. Before that, someone made a scene in Mount Shao and forced Chen Wanli's former young master to death. You all know that, right? Prince Zhang didn't come forward to explain it, not because he didn't have evidence, but because he was busy. Do you know what he was busy with? In the past 10 days, President Zhang has been guarding the wheat field that he personally planted every day. Just now, I heard the old village head say that the director's wheat has sprouted. In 10 days, the wheat has sprouted. Chapter 1469. Seedling sprouted? 10 days? Wheat? Seedlings sprouted from wheat? How could this be possible? Everyone was going crazy. They were all farmers who had been in contact with the Zhuang family for generations. They knew very well when the Zhuang family seeds would sprout and when they would produce seedlings. However, how could this be possible? 10 days, wheat could sprout. For a moment, whispers were incessant. Even the high officials and dignitaries on the second floor, who had been quiet all the time, could not sit still at this time. They started to talk about it. This matter was not simple. It was possible to make the wheat in the field sprout within 10 days, and it was also a common thing. But to make the wheat sprout within 10 days, this did not make sense. At this time, although many people didn't know what was going on, at the very least, this thing was definitely related to the matter of the phosphate fertilizer. At this time, on the second floor, a short, dark-skinned, middle-aged man cupped his fist and said, "Mr. Sun, we all know about the things you said. Are they related to the phosphate fertilizer? And the matter of buying land today, does it have anything to do with Master Fang and the others buying land in large quantities a few days ago?" The words of the man on the second floor instantly attracted everyone's attention. Someone looked at the middle-aged man and could not help exclaiming, "Isn't this the butler of the Minister of the Agriculture Temple, Lord Liu?" In an instant, everyone looked at that man in a different way. The Agriculture Temple was the best hub to manage the farmland of the entire Tang Dynasty. Above it was the Ministry of Works, which was a special department that could be directly subordinate to the emperor. At this time, the people of this department came. What did this mean? This indicated that the people of the Western Agricultural Temple were also paying attention to this matter. Furthermore, the Western Agricultural Temple didn't even have the most basic information about this matter. When Blind Sun heard this, he cupped his fists towards the second floor and said, "Originally, Lord Housekeeper, you are right. In fact, if this matter is not connected, then it really can't be justified. However, as for why even the thrifty Fang Gong would spend so much money and go through so much trouble to do such a thing, I don't know the specifics of this matter. However, I have heard that on that day the emperor and the marquises had a discussion at Fang Gong's manor. Thus, I feel that this matter should be connected." He really didn't know where these people got the news from. It seemed that this matter had been forcibly hidden by someone. No one knew what was going on. Most importantly, even if the people behind him were to investigate, they would not be able to find out anything. After all, the person behind him was the current crown prince. What did that mean? If even the crown prince didn't have the authority to investigate, or rather, he wasn't going to investigate and was just trying to cover it up, then, at this moment, Blind Sun continued, "In fact, everyone don't panic. According to my observation, there is a missing middleman. That middleman is Lao Li. I have inquired about this matter before. The most active one among them is a mysterious businessman. I have heard that this businessman is extremely powerful and has a complicated network of relationships. He also calls Lord Zhang Feng, the dean of White Deer College, as well as has a close relationship with Lord Zhang Sun Wuji of the Censorate. Thus, I feel that this matter of Prince Zhang Feng buying the land is definitely not a coincidence. And when he bought the land, the people on the mountain were doing the extraction of phosphate fertilizer. I don't need to say more about what this means, right?" After Blind Sun finished speaking, the whole place was in an uproar. What? Oh my God! Could it be that the phosphate fertilizer is real? But this damn phosphate fertilizer, where on earth can we get it? At this time, there is less than a month before the autumn planting ends. This phosphate fertilizer. At this moment, there was a slight disturbance at the back of the crowd. A fat woman was stumbling into the crowd, shouting a person's name at the top of her lungs. "Sun Ergu, where the F***ck are you? Sun Ergu. Come home with me. Sun Ergu." A moment later, a dark-skinned and skinny middle-aged man came running out of Hung Tong's carriage tower as if he was startled. He immediately interrupted everyone's conversation. The two of them, one thin and weak and the other fat, instantly caused waves of laughter in the hall. Although Blind Sun was slightly displeased, he could do nothing but wait for this farce to end. But some people could not wait. The housekeeper on the second floor scolded with a gloomy face. Men quickly dragged these two people away. Hearing this, the fat woman's face instantly turned pale with fright. She stopped shouting to find her husband and said hurriedly, "Sir, please spare my life. I really did not mean to disturb you, but this matter concerns our income next year, so I was so presumptuous." At this moment, the crowd scolded the woman for her recklessness. The woman was also anxious. Suddenly she shouted angrily, "Look at what this is. I just picked it up on the official road. Someone pulled it down from the soil of Shao Mountain." While speaking, the woman opened her hand, and there were a few bluish-yellow wheat seedlings that were lying quietly in the wind. They were slightly green in color and they were fluttering in the wind. In an instant, the whole street, everything fell into a deathly silence. Chapter 1470. My meow. They really saw my meow. And it was real. What did that mean? What the F***K does that mean, this thing? This meant that the matter of the phosphate fertilizer was real. Everything was real. The mysterious matter of buying land was also real. For a moment, everyone no longer paid attention to Blind Sun as they all surrounded the woman. Madam, where did you get this thing? I'll give you 10 copper coins. How about you sell it to me? I'll give you 1,000 strings of cash. The woman was dumbfounded. She looked at the money in front of her in surprise and did not know what to do. But in the face of such a huge temptation, she still chose money. After all, money was the right thing to do. What was the use of a sprout? After choosing the highest bidder, the woman pulled her man and rushed out of the crowd happily. Of course, she was not going home. She was going straight to the Chang and local government. When she was at the city gate earlier, there were already countless people waiting there. She had only managed to snatch that handful of soil after breaking her head. He didn't know who was in charge of this, but in general, if this thing could be brought into the city and transported to the palace, it meant that this thing was incomparably precious. Soon after, the plump woman found out that these things were obtained from the White Deer Institute, and they were related to phosphate fertilizers. In an instant, the plump woman saw hope. Phosphate fertilizer. He had only heard of this thing but had never seen it before. How could he have known that this thing would actually have such a great use? He regretted that he did not get more just now. 1,000 strings of cash. He could sell another moo of land with that. After the fat woman and the thin man left in a hurry, the person who bought the seed also disappeared into the crowd. Then he appeared in the homes of the high-ranking officials in Chang and city. In the next moment, the entire Chang and city was in turmoil. Everyone rushed to the Chang and local government. At the same time, in the imperial study of the palace, spies came in an endless stream. They came in a hurry and left in a hurry. In front of him there was a large pile of memorials. Wei Jing, Fang Xianling and Du Ruhui were hurriedly organizing these things. Li Shimin would not ask about these things. But this matter was so serious that he did not dare to take it lightly. Although Zhang Feng made it sound easy and this matter could be solved easily, Li Shimin was worried when he saw the mountain of spies and the risks involved in this matter. This was the first time something like this had happened since ancient times. If this matter continued to develop, it would only bring him endless trouble. Let's not talk about these things for now. If things were to continue like this, then the land, at the thought of this, Li Shimin rubbed his forehead. Go, send the message quickly. From now on, whoever dares to buy or sell land will be fined double. Hearing this, Zhang Sun Wuji's hand trembled and pulled out a big lump of his beard. He hurriedly asked, Your Majesty, perhaps it's a little too late now? If we go now then. Yu Qigong also hurriedly tried to persuade him. They had no choice. Their men had all gone to buy land. They had not returned until now. They did not know what was going on. If they went now, they would definitely be seen. By then, they would be in trouble. Therefore, at this time, they could only pray that the emperor would not give the order so soon. At least, before the morning court tomorrow. During this period, they were very confident that they could do something. When Li Shimin heard this, he looked at the few of them playfully. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? When they heard this, they were a little embarrassed and buried their heads in their chests. Seeing this, Li Shimin shook his head speechlessly and said, This order has to be given. Just now, the spy reported that the people from the Ministry of Works have gone there, but they still can't suppress it. The local government of Chang and can't hold it anymore. Moreover, according to the news, there is no fertile land within a radius of 20 miles of Chang, and basically all of it has been sold. At this time, someone is actually preparing to reach near Mount Longsho. Who do you think it is? Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Someone had actually stretched their hand to where? That was the royal garden, where the imperial manor was, and where the iron ore and phosphate mines were. At this time, even they did not dare to think about where to reach it this time. This was simply courting death. Who was it? Li Shimin waved his hand and said, Let's not talk about this for now. I know what you're thinking. If you want land, I'll give you some at my discretion. Why do you have to add to the trouble now? Wei Jing, Zhang Sun Wuji, Yu Qigong, I'll leave this matter to the three of you. Quickly go to the local government of Chang, and then thoroughly investigate this matter. Also, find out who wants to buy Mount Longsho. Chapter 1471. Night fell just like that. The entire city of Chang and had fallen into darkness. The lanterns were like glowing gems that filled the night sky. They were hidden in a thin layer of fog and flickered. In Chang'an City, squads of City Defense Army were shuttling back and forth in every corner of Chang'an City. Apart from that, the whole Chang'an City was eerily quiet. Not even a dog barking could be heard in Chang'an City tonight. The extreme silence only lasted for a short while. After the people from the city defense team left, Chang'an City slowly became lively. People in all kinds of clothes shuttled back and forth in the shadows before entering the buildings one by one. It seemed that there was something waiting for them. In the west of Chang'an City, there was an ordinary house near the residence of the 16th prince. At this time it was already brightly lit. But strangely, all the places where light could pass through were covered with quilts. If a dark shadow hadn't knocked open a window by chance, no one outside would have noticed the abnormality. Inside the room, there were already dozens of people wearing clothes of various colors. Their faces were covered and they were whispering to each other. When the black figure arrived, everyone in the room instantly fell silent. The man took off the bamboo hat on his head, revealing a head of gray hair. His face was covered with a black mask just like everyone else. Seeing this, everyone hurriedly got up and bowed. The man waved his hand and motioned for everyone to sit down. He looked around with his hawk-like triangular eyes and said, "Everyone, my master said that after today the meeting with so many people will be cancelled." When he finished speaking, everyone exclaimed in an instant. Then they asked in a low voice. The man waved his hand and said helplessly, "This is a choice that must be made for the sake of the great cause. Today, on the mountain and in Chang'an City, you all know about it, right? I don't want to talk too much about this matter. Zhang Feng has already noticed us. The reason why he took out this phosphate fertilizer today and didn't hesitate to pull out all the wheat seedlings in the field is undoubtedly to lure us out of the snake's hole." What? He is just a young boy who is still wet behind the ears. How can he think so much? Since he wants to lure us out, isn't it better to give him a thunderous blow? Why should we be so afraid? He's just a nameless brat with no background. Could it be that Master is so afraid of him? Yes, Master. Today many people in Chang'an City are also in an uproar because of the land purchase. During the morning assembly tomorrow someone will definitely mention it. As long as we do a little work, we will definitely frame Zhang Feng with the crime of disrupting the order of the court and deliberately instigating people to rob the land purchase. As long as we are convicted of the crime, we can easily get the phosphate fertilizer and Zhang's secret. The old man pondered for a moment and then shook his head. The crowd was in an uproar. What? The old man put his hands behind his back and looked at the empty wall in the room. Our master said that this matter is actually a big net woven by Zhang Feng and the emperor. And the so-called Lao Li, who is rumored in the market, is actually the emperor's man. Buzz. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but gasp. The emperor's man? What did this mean? Could it be that the emperor knew all this from the beginning and acquiesced to Zhang Feng's nonsense on the mountain? This didn't make sense. If so, didn't it mean that their plan had been exposed from the beginning? Now, our master asked us to stop the discussion and chose to remain silent. Was it because he was afraid of being exposed? But what kind of person was Master? He was someone who could reach the heavens. If we knew this person, if we could get rid of him, it would be like breaking one of the emperor's arms. Wouldn't it be easier for our master's plan to succeed? Why did he choose to remain silent? Facing the doubts of the crowd, the old man shook his head and said, "Don't argue about this matter. Our master said that although we did a good job in the beginning, we did it too hastily. That guy found out something. Last time, that guy went to the mountain to meet Zhang Feng, and then the phosphate fertilizer was exposed to the world. That is to say, that guy has found out about our existence, or maybe he has been vigilant. The reason why he did this was to lure us out. Could it be that you didn't notice anything from the Tang family? Why did Zhang Feng go crazy and kill people in Chang'an City? Didn't you find anything? Why did he send a student to the funeral in a high-profile way and then kill the 4 old forces? Didn't you think about why?" Hiss. The crowd couldn't help but gasp. In an instant they figured out all the things that they couldn't figure out before. This guy had thought about all this a long time ago. Right at this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps resounded from the streets once more. In an instant, everyone fell completely silent. Only after the sound of the patrolling soldiers' footsteps had left did the old man say, "In short, from now onward, all of you must settle down. You must not allow Zhang Feng and His Majesty to get hold of any information that can be used against you." Chapter 1472. Everyone was shocked when they heard that. The old man didn't have much to say at this time. After all, with his high status and authority, he knew a lot of secrets. Furthermore, he knew that the so-called Old Li was actually the current His Majesty. Since the incident at the border, or before that, the Emperor and Zhang Feng had thought about these things, but it wasn't very obvious at that time. Only this time, the damn Tang family chose such a sinister trick. Not only did they fail to force out the secret of the phosphate fertilizer and the things in Zhang Feng's head, but they also angered Zhang Feng. They didn't expect that Zhang Feng would be so terrible when he was angry. He could kill people in Chang and city in front of so many people. He even made the people of the Wang clan choose to withdraw and not help either side. Even the people of the Wang clan are starting to be afraid. What does that mean? It meant that they had already found the clues of the problem. Zhang Feng killed people in the street to force out some information. The people of the Wang clan had already appeared on Zhang Feng's list. That was why the Wang clan gave in at the first time. At this time, if the Wang clan dared to do anything, perhaps the Wang clan, or at least the things of the Wang clan around Chang, and would have changed their surname to Li. The old man took a deep breath and waved his hand. In short, send the message. From today onwards, everyone will go into hiding and do whatever they need to do. Act as if no one knows about this. Also, tell those who know about this to shut their mouths. Your Excellency, why don't we try harder? The rumors in Chang, and today originated from the things leaked out of the dozens of carriages. As long as we can make use of this opportunity to let our people spread rumors, I believe that we can force out the secret of the phosphate fertilizer. Shut up. The old man glared at that person fiercely and then resumed his gentle tone. However, at that moment, the old man broke out a murderous aura that made everyone's heart tremble. This was a murderous look. The old man said faintly, "Let's leave this matter at that. All of you back off. We'll burn down the house and make it look like the kitchen caught fire." At this time, everyone was already terrified. How could they still dare to say anything? He could only accept the order and leave in a hurry. After everyone disappeared, the entire room was plunged into complete darkness. After a while, the old man slowly stood up from his chair. After confirming that there was no one else in the house, he carefully moved away the bookcase behind him and squeezed into a cave that was only half a person's height and faintly illuminated by light. The entrance of the cave was not big. However, when he entered the cave and entered the underground tunnel, he was instantly greeted by brilliant lights and an underground palace that was even more majestic than the political announcement palace. The entire underground palace was directly renovated according to the appearance of the political announcement palace. The four walls were piled with pieces of glittering gold bricks. The gold bricks were carved with 5-clawed golden dragons. The 16 huge pillars in the main hall were entwined with ferocious divine dragons. As for the pillar itself, it was piled up with jade stones. After the old man came in, he carefully sealed the hole behind the old man with wall soil. Then he used the large rocks at the side to block it up. Finally, he poured a few baskets of soil on top of it and carefully made it into the original shape of the wall. Only then did the old man hurriedly walk up the stairs on the forearm of a 5-clawed golden dragon to the top of the hall. On the dragon throne directly above the main hall. At this time, a man wearing a luxurious dragon robe was sitting on it. However, he was admiring the map of the entire Tang dynasty on the wall behind him. On both sides of this man, a group of women in revealing clothes stood carefully on both sides. They did not dare to move as if they were dead. If it were not for the slight rise and fall of their breasts, they would undoubtedly be dead. "Your humble servant greets you, master." The old man respectfully knelt on the ground and saluted. The man waved his hand slightly and asked in a hoarse voice, "How is the matter being handled?" The voice seemed to come from under a mask, but it also seemed to be really hoarse. However, this was not important to the old man. He just said respectfully, "The order has been given." The man still did not turn his head. However, the jade beads on the crown on his head did not move at all. After a while, the man in the dragon robe asked indifferently, "What do you think of today's matter?" When the old man heard this, he hurriedly said, "Master, I think that this matter should be a trick played by Li Er and Zhang Feng. As long as we hide well enough, they will not be able to get hold of our weakness." The man's crown swayed slightly. When the old man heard this, his expression changed abruptly and he said, "I should not have recklessly guessed master's judgment. This is a capital offense. You really deserve to die. How can a filthy person like you call the emperor by his name? Don't say that before the great cause is accomplished." "Yes, master." The old man heaved a sigh of relief. Then the man said slowly, "Don't let anyone know about what happened today. Don't even think about the phosphate fertilizer. That kid has been wary of the old man since the first time he met the old man. That damn kid. Even now, the old man does not know if that kid has been suspecting the old man since then. Put this matter on hold for now. Inform Chiotzi to speed up the progress. I want to see what the kid and the emperor will do next. Yes, master. Chapter 1473. Night. It was still very dark. Although the sky was very good these days, no one knew what was going on. During this period of time, the moon always hung above everyone's head early in the morning. By the time it was 9 o'clock in the evening, the moon had already fallen on the mountains of Qinling. There was not even a single star in the sky. It was so dull that it made people feel a little depressed when they saw it. Taiji Palace. In Li Shimin's bedroom. Although it was already late at night, Li Shimin was still reading the mountainous pile of memorials by candlelight. Almost half of these memorials were urgent requests for seeds, and the other half were reports of daily trifles. Li Shimin basically did not even look at these memorials and left them all to the secretariat. As long as it was not a serious matter, Li Shimin did not bother to pay attention to it now. In the middle of the desk, there were more than a dozen vermilion memorials. At this time, Li Shimin was reading these memorials. These memorials all came from the army. To be precise, they were urgent reports from the major military camps stationed in the border. Only such urgent reports would use memorials of this color. However, at this time the content of the memorials gave Li Shimin a headache. Junla was in internal strife, begging the Tang army to intervene. The Tubo and Tuyuhun rebels were also slowly making progress with the participation of the Tang dynasty's army. However, Tubo and Tuyuhun were in urgent need of food, and now they were planning to send envoys to ask for food. How could the Tang dynasty have extra money and rice? If they had any. That would be good. But the most important thing was that they did not. On the other side there was news from Li Jing in Yuzhou. Li Jing said that the army of Tuli Khan was frequently deployed at the border, and Shelley's troops in Longyu Road were doing the same. As for India, although there was no news at this time, Li Shimin vaguely felt that something seemed to be brewing in India. After all, most of the troops were gathered near Chiotzi city. It would be strange if they didn't make any big moves. The 100,000 soldiers of the Tang dynasty in Tubo and Tuyuhun should already be on their way to Chiotzi. This seemed to be the reason for the unrest among the Indian and Turkic tribes. As for Tubo and Tuyuhun, although there weren't any news, the recent rebellions in these two places didn't seem to have eased up at all. Instead, the situation was getting worse. They seemed to be deliberately delaying the speed of the Tang dynasty's army heading west. This was what gave him the biggest headache. In addition, there was the unforeseen event in Chang, and at this time, the pair of invisible hands, and Zhang Feng's words that there seemed to be a person stirring up the situation. Moreover, this person seemed to know the situation of the Tang dynasty and the situation in the palace like the back of his hand. This person was the one who gave Li Shimin the most headaches. Li Shimin rubbed his forehead with some distress. Although Zhang Feng didn't say all this clearly, Li Shimin knew that there seemed to be someone in the imperial court behind this matter, and this person must be in a high position and power. But who on earth was this person? This was what worried Li Shimin the most. After coming down from Mount Shao, Li Shimin had been thinking about this matter, but until now he still couldn't figure out a clue. At this time, at the door of the bedroom, Shao Gizi gently knocked on the door. Seeing this, Li Shimin hurriedly came to his senses and coughed. Seeing this, Shao Gizi hurriedly pushed open the door a crack and bent over to enter Li Shimin's study. Li Shimin seemed to have made an agreement with Shao Gizi. As soon as he entered the door, Shao Gizi hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, just now the spy reported that a house near Jiaqing was on fire." Generally, such things didn't need to be reported to him, but at this time Shao Gizi personally said it. Li Shimin instantly noticed that something was different. He waved his hand and said, "Tell me in detail." Earlier today, our spies discovered that people wearing night clothes were entering the house one after another. At first, our people really didn't notice this inconspicuous house, but the strange thing was that this house's windows and doors were all covered with quilts, and only those people could see when they entered, so the spies went forward to investigate. Although they didn't hear anything after these people left for a meal, the house caught fire. Li Shimin was stunned and said, "You mean? Did they catch them?" Shao Gizi hurriedly said, "They were caught, but these people didn't say anything. Even the cruelest torture was useless. However, a name occasionally came out of these people's mouths." When Li Shimin heard this, his body instantly trembled and said, "What name?" "My lord." When Li Shimin heard that, he was about to explode in anger. "My lord, that was a name?" However, these two words made him even more certain of a problem. That was, what happened in this house must be related to that pair of big hands. When he thought of this, Li Shimin waved his hand and said, "Pass down the message." Investigate at all costs. Also, can these people be caught? Has the fire been controlled? Basically, everyone who came out of the house has been caught and is trying their best to put out the fire. When Li Shimin heard this, he suddenly stood up and waved his sleeves and said, "Even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground, you have to find out the secret of this house for me. Also, seal the city and strictly investigate anyone who comes and goes after the curfew tonight." Chapter 1474. Dong, dong, dong. The morning bell rang 3 times. In the political announcement hall, a majestic and sonorous voice resounded. "Welcome, Your Majesty. Long live Your Majesty." Li Shimin walked into the hall with a solemn expression, wearing a crown and a dragon robe. "Everyone rise." With a wave of his hand, Li Shimin slowly sat down on the dragon throne. However, before he could sit down, an official from the Ministry of Works hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, I have a report to submit." Li Shimin waved his hand and said, "Submit the report." "Your Majesty, there was a rumor in the city yesterday that more than a dozen carriages of malt had been delivered from Shao Mountain. But until now, I haven't received any news about it. What's more, many people in the city were in a state of chaos because of it. Some people even went to the local government of Chang and city to buy land because of it. What's more, some people in the imperial court also joined in. I have a report here. It contains a list of the officials in the imperial court who bought the land, as well as the area of the land that they wanted to buy, as well as the amount of money." When Li Shimin heard this, he waved his hand indifferently and said, "What do you want to say? I already know about this matter." The official from the Ministry of Works was taken aback. He hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, I respectfully request that you issue a decree to thoroughly investigate White Deer College in Shao Mountain and find out why they are disturbing the people's hearts at this time. Also, investigate these buyers and find out if they are in cahoots with the Dean of White Deer College, Zhang Feng. Although the matter of the phosphate fertilizer has caused a huge uproar, our Ministry of Works has never heard of such a matter. Furthermore, we don't know which ancient book had such a record." Li Shimin glanced at the official indifferently. Then he pointed at Zhang Sun Wuji and said, "You can ask Minister Zhao about this matter directly." "Tell me." Zhang Sun Wuji hurriedly bowed and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." At this time, Li Shimin asked again, "How many people are here for this?" "Your Majesty, this subject is here for this matter. This subject has something to report. This old subject has something to report. This old subject wants to participate in that White Deer College's Zhang Feng. This subject wishes to report to the Duke of Yi." Basically, as soon as Li Shimin finished speaking, countless officials stood out to accuse Yu Qigong and Zhang Feng of misconduct. Seeing this, Li Shimin smiled and said, "Zhao Guogong, you say it." When Zhang Sun Wuji heard this, he reported the white jade tablet. Then, he looked at them indifferently and said, "His Majesty has known about this since yesterday. As for the Duke of Yi's things, they are all displayed in His Majesty's imperial garden. As for the people who bought the land, last night, Old Man had already received the Emperor's order and went to the Yamen with Fang Gongzi." "What?" The officials could not help but burst into an uproar. "Does the Emperor know about this? Does that mean the Emperor knows about this? Then the matter of the phosphate fertilizer, is it true?" For a moment, all the officials in the imperial court began to make their own plans. If that was the case, then the Emperor knew about the phosphate fertilizer. That was to say, the phosphate fertilizer was true? Is this thing really useful? In an instant, all the officials became excited. Each of their families had at least a few dozen mu of land or even 100 mu of land. These were all bestowed by the Emperor, and the autumn planting this time was very important. Is that thing that was said to be able to double or even multiply the yield of every mu of land true? Moreover, when they returned to the city yesterday, they had personally seen the wheat sprouts that fell on the ground. Therefore, although they wanted to impeach these 2 people today, they actually wanted to confirm whether this matter was true and what the Emperor would say. However, the calmness and indifference displayed by the Emperor at this moment made everyone unable to remain calm. This seems, probably, the Emperor knows about this matter. At this moment, Li Shimin saw the fervent look in everyone's eyes and knew that the matter was about to be settled. He waved his hand and said, "Do you still remember what happened that day at the heaven worship ceremony? The next day I went to White Deer College. I only saw the 1 mu of land that Zhang Feng personally planted on the mountain from afar. Cheng Chumo and the others also personally participated in this planting. I can confirm that the thing that can make the wheat sprouts within 10 days is this phosphate fertilizer. Therefore, I decided yesterday to have these wheat sprouts transported back in the name of the Ministry of Works so that I can personally watch these wheat sprouts grow every day. Last night, I drafted an imperial edict. Although I haven't announced it yet, I have already sent Minister Zhao to the government office. I now announce that from today onwards, any land within the Tang Dynasty, including the purchase and sale of land by the people, must be approved by the Ministry of Agriculture. Li Shimin didn't mention the phosphate fertilizer. He also wanted to use the method that Zhang Feng had suggested. He didn't need to deliberately publicize it but instead kept it a secret. He wanted to see if these people could really hold it in. It was up to them now. As for the end, although Li Shimin had not thought of a good way for the time being, when he thought of what had happened yesterday, he had only deliberately scattered some things along the path of the cart, and then arranged for a few people to go for a walk, and it had caused more than 30 memorials from officials in the court today. What did this mean? This meant that this matter had really caused a huge commotion in Chang'an City. He wanted to see if his vague words today could add fuel to the fire. Thinking of this, Li Shimin waved his sleeves and said, "Court is dismissed." Chapter 1475. Inside Chang'an City. The sky had just begun to brighten. However, the autumn fog was so cold that it was as if the air had frozen. If one went out for a walk, he or she would come back with a head full of water vapor. They were less than 10 feet apart so they could not see if there was anyone on the other side. Even so, the sound of people coughing could be heard everywhere in the city. Some of them were teasing birds and some of them were teasing dogs. They rose and fell one after another. At this time in the past, everyone would be curled up at home drinking tea, looking for a good friend to chat about anything under the sun. Or would they be early in the morning? They would head out of the city. Or perhaps he had started looking for work early on. The entrance of the East Market and the entrance of the West Market were the best places to look for work. Because when it was time to open the market, countless businessmen would come. And their target was these businessmen. Whether it was transporting goods or helping people deliver goods, these were the most profitable things. Or they would help the businessmen to occupy the stalls. A slightly better stall could be sold for dozens of copper coins. If two businessmen quarreled over it, the price would be higher. It should be known that except for the shops in the East Market and the West Market, there was only so much space. The government would never sell a piece of land casually. They were all smart people. Who would do such a stupid thing? The government could still profit from it, so the higher-ups turned a blind eye to it. This had also become the rule of Chang'an City. Although there were fewer peddlers in Chang'an City now, that was relative. After all, not many people could go to the Shao Mountain Market. Those who could go anywhere had stalls in the Chang'an City Market. But at this moment, a few people from the Ministry of Internal Servants hurried over from the palace. Under everyone's astonished gazes, they posted a brand new yellow notice on the wall. In this era, yellow meant imperial power. Something that could be posted on the bulletin board, and it was done by the Ministry of Internal Servants in person, was undoubtedly an imperial edict. When the people saw that, they could not stay calm. As soon as the Ministry of Internal Servants left, they swarmed over. Although most of them did not understand this thing, it did not stop them from joining in the fun. After all, this was the imperial list. It was an imperial edict. How many imperial edicts could one see in a lifetime? Furthermore, how could she post it right in front of him? If word of this got out, it would be a loss of face. What the hell is this? Is there anyone with a big mouth? Come and see what's written here? Who would recognize this word? Come and take a look. Everyone panicked. Although they squeezed through the crowd quickly, they were dumbfounded when they surrounded him. None of them were King literate. What could they do if they surrounded him? After a while, after a burst of chaos, a scholar was hurriedly invited over. This scholar was wearing the uniform of the Imperial College. When he saw the Imperial Edict on the board, he was very surprised. He hurriedly read out the contents of the Imperial Edict. The general meaning of the Imperial Edict was that the matter of the phosphate fertilizer was true, and the wheat sprouts that everyone saw yesterday were watered by the phosphate fertilizer. Furthermore, the Emperor, the Crown Prince, and the young dukes had all personally participated and seen it. Also, the sale and purchase of land had been abolished. When the crowd heard this, they couldn't help but gasp. This was real. This phosphate fertilizer. It was real. Although the Imperial Edict was vague, this Imperial Edict seemed to explain a lot of things. That was, the matter of the phosphate fertilizer was true. Although many people didn't dare to believe it, the wheat sprouts yesterday were absolutely true. Almost everyone had seen it. However, if the phosphate fertilizer was real, how long would it take for it to be produced? What was the price for it? Who could use it? The crowd couldn't help but burst into a commotion again. Everyone wanted to know if this was true. At the same time, the Eason pastry shop was blocked by people early on. It wasn't because the snacks here were delicious, nor was it because these people were so rich that they could suddenly afford to eat snacks. Everyone knew that the shopkeeper of the Eason pastry shop, Zhang Shan, was the father-in-law of the dean of White Deer College, Zhang Feng. Moreover, he had also bought land yesterday. Therefore, these people wanted to ask about the phosphate fertilizer. They even wanted to buy some land from Zhang Shan. After all, Zhang Shan was a well-known philanthropist, a great philanthropist. They didn't dare to go to Zhang Feng's mansion. Not to mention that there was no one there. Even if there were people there, they wouldn't dare to go. The area of the mansion of the 16th prince belonged to the entire Chang'an city. Apart from the imperial palace, it was the only place where the imperial guards patrolled all day. Miscellaneous people were also not allowed to make a scene there. These could be ignored. After all, although there was something wrong here, people could still enter. The only difference was the guards at the entrance of Zhang Feng's mansion. Those guards were all retired from the military. Not only were they burly men, but they also exuded a murderous aura. Every time they looked at each other, they would feel goosebumps. Who would dare to go there? Moreover, this matter was nothing else. Even if they went there, it would be useless. Therefore, the crowd set their sights on Zhang Shan. They had heard that old Master Zhang Shan had bought at least 500 mu of land in the Chang'an local government yesterday. Chapter 1476. More and more people gathered at the entrance of Eason pastry shop. In the end, the entire entrance of the East Market was filled with people. Even the entrance of Zhang Shan's mansion was blocked. It was the same at the back door as well. At that moment, Zhang Shan, his wife, and Zhang Yuyao felt like they were sitting on pins and needles. They kept pacing back and forth in the living room. Master, it's not good. A few other officials are here. At that moment, Zhang Shan's butler rushed in a panic. His shout gave Zhang Shan a fright. The others were not afraid, but the officials were here. Zhang Shan hurriedly asked, "Who's that? What's his position?" "Old Master, I heard that he's from the Ministry of War. Judging from his uniform, he seems to be a 5th-rank official. He's wearing green. The people from the Ministry of Agriculture, Taichung Temple, and the Ministry of Appointments are here." What? Zhang Shan was so scared that his body went limp and he sat on the ground. "Oh my God, what's going on? What are they doing here at this time?" Zhang Shan's wife also panicked. Zhang Yuyao was so anxious that her face turned pale. If it were anyone else, he could think of a way to deal with them. However, the officials were here. At this time, at that moment, another person hurried in. As soon as he entered the door, he said hurriedly, "Bad news, old master. Someone else is here. He said that he's your benefactor. There's also someone who claims to be your distant uncle." When Zhang Shan heard that, his head could not help but explode. This matter definitely had something to do with the land he bought yesterday. Otherwise, why would those distant uncles suddenly come knocking on his door? One had to know that even when he was begging on the streets, that person still slandered him, saying that he had nothing to do with him. He even got someone to beat him up. On the streets. As for this benefactor, when Zhang Shan went up the mountain, he suddenly had a vague feeling that he might be the old shopkeeper's younger brother. Back then he thought that being a pastry chef had no future, so he went to Luozhou City to develop his career. He heard that he was doing well there. Recently he returned to Chang'an City. It was said that he was dealing in porcelain and silk. Why would he come to the mountain gate at this time? This time, Zhang Shan could not sit still anymore. He hurriedly ordered, "Butler, have you gone to the mountain to inform them?" "I've already sent someone over, but it's probably too late." When Zhang Shan heard that, he slapped his head and said, "Let's go to Chang'an University and invite them over." Although there was no one at Chang'an University these days, the people at the gate of the college were all Zhang Feng's subordinates. Naturally, they knew about their relationship. Zhang Feng felt a little more confident when he called them over. It was not far from Chang'an University. The housekeeper found a clever person to climb over the wall and run to Chang'an University to get help. Zhang Shan hurriedly asked the housekeeper to keep the people outside under control. He silently calculated the distance from Chang'an University to here. Then he slowly put away the impatience on his face and walked out of the room. As soon as he stepped out of the room, the clamor that filled the sky made his eardrums hurt. The butler stood at the door, sweating profusely. When Zhang Shan arrived, the crowd immediately burst into an uproar. "Master Zhang is here. Master Zhang, please come out and be the judge. Why is this guy blocking our way?" Zhang Shan looked over and saw a pot-bellied official in a green official uniform standing next to the person who was shouting the loudest. When Zhang Shan looked at him, the man also looked at Zhang Shan. Then he cupped his fists in surprise and said, you can be Master Zhang Shan. I'm not talented, so I'll be working in the Ministry of Personnel. When Zhang Shan saw this, he also cupped his fists and said, So it's you, Master Zhang? May I know what brings you here? Before he could finish, the other officials also came forward to greet him. At this moment, a middle-aged man in a purple robe with a pair of triangular eyes, an aquiline nose and a bean-sized mole at the corner of his mouth, coughed and said, Zhang Shan, I haven't seen you for many years. You've become more capable. Shanzi, I'm your uncle. Now that you've become rich, don't you want to be married to your family? Their words instantly made their identities clear, causing the citizens who had wanted to seek help to shrink back in fear. Zhang Shan smiled bitterly and cupped his fists to calm them down. Then he said, Everyone, I know why you're here, but you all know about the imperial list today. I don't dare to sell this land. If you want to buy it, you can go to the county government and get a certificate from the Ministry of Works. I'll definitely sell some to you. Even I can't do that now. How can this be? Old Master Zhang, of course we're not here for your fields. We're here to ask you if the phosphate fertilizer thing is true. We hope Old Master Zhang can tell us clearly. That's right, Old Master Zhang. We all know how you are. Don't try to hide it at this time. Just tell us if the phosphate fertilizer is real. Where can we get some? How about you ask your son-in-law to get some? Zhang Shan suddenly understood. He looked at the officials and the other two. They seemed to be very nervous at this moment. He smiled helplessly and said, Everyone, I really don't know about this. Besides, although the marriage between my daughter and Prince Zhang Zhangfeng has been settled, it's better not to talk about it. It's a secret of the academy. How can I get involved? But I can promise you one thing. I've already sent people to the mountain. If there's any news, I'll tell you immediately. How about it? Zhang Shan didn't care whether they believed it or not. He ignored them. He hurriedly bowed to the officials and said, Everyone, please come in. Chapter 1477. Zhang Shan was also very depressed. Those commoners were easy to deal with, but these people were difficult to deal with. He had to invite them into the house first. When the white-bearded old man who claimed to be Zhang Shan's uncle saw this, he smiled and asked someone to carry him in. Although Zhang Shan didn't like it very much, there was nothing he could do. He could only let him be and pretend that he didn't see it. Along the way, the old man pointed at everything in Zhang Shan's mansion. Everything was not good and everything was not good. It seemed that he had already regarded this place as his own home. If one didn't know better, they would think that this was his mansion. Before they entered the house, Zhang Shan's steward had already hurriedly called Madame Zhang and Miss Zhang to the backyard. At this moment, when they entered the living room, the old man pointed at the layout of the living room again. The servants and maidservants of the Zhang mansion all looked displeased. But Zhang Shan had been silent. How could they dare to interrupt? When they entered the house, the old man sat at the head of the Zhang family without caring about anything else. The few officials who saw this frowned. However, they were here today for other things. Moreover, this was other people's family matter. They had no right to interfere. They could only sit down at Zhang Shan's request. When they sat down, without waiting for Zhang Shan to speak, the old man asked, Esteemed bailiffs, what brings you here today? They looked at each other and then glanced at Zhang Shan, who was silent. One of them said, We're here today for the phosphate fertilizer. Old sir, may I know who you are? Hearing this, the old man nodded and said, Old man is Zhang Shan's uncle. Zhang Shan lost his parents when he was young, so I helped to deal with all the important matters. Today, when I heard of such a big matter, I naturally came to take a look. Zhang Shan couldn't listen to this anymore. He pretended that he didn't hear anything and looked out of the door with his hands behind his back. When the officials saw this, they could only chuckle. Who couldn't see that? This old man wanted to take advantage of his seniority to gain benefits. Before they came, they had already investigated Zhang Shan's background. Naturally, they knew about this old fellow. When the old man saw that they were silent, he pointed at the man who claimed to be Zhang Shan's benefactor and said, I remember you. Back then, I personally sent Zhang Shan to your house. You were the one who always made things difficult for him. Even when Zhang Shan's master passed away, you didn't show up. It was my Shaner who took care of the old man. Tell me, what are you doing here today? What are you doing? Old thing, don't flatter yourself. Let's not beat around the bush. Everyone who came here today basically wanted to get some benefits from this place. Don't King flatter yourself. Who do you think you are? If you hadn't been forced into a corner by Zhang Shan and seized Zhang Shan's family property, would my brother have taken him in as a disciple when he was about to starve to death? Ha! The old man did not lose his temper. He smiled and took a sip of the tea. Then he frowned and said, Shan, we have an important guest. Are you going to serve him with this lousy tea? Why aren't you changing the tea? Sir, this is the best tea we have. Furthermore, this tea is something that even His Majesty would rarely see. It was personally made by my son-in-law. If you don't like it, then don't drink it. How dare you? Just when the old man was about to explode in anger, a group of dozens of burly men slowly stepped into Zhang Shan's living room. When they saw these people, everyone's expression changed instantly. Zhang Shan's heart was finally at ease. Meanwhile, in White Deer College, Zhang Feng personally brought the string of money to the paper mill. After the people from the Zhang residence were led to the mountain, they anxiously paced around the entrance of Zhang Feng's house. They could not take their eyes off the buildings here. However, after waiting for a long time, they did not see anyone who could talk to him. Only a security guard followed him closely, as if he was guarding against a thief. However, the more he waited, the more anxious he became. At this moment, the entrance of the residence was blocked, and there were officials at the door. It was undoubtedly about the purchase of land. When he left the city, he saw it clearly. This was an imperial edict from His Majesty, forbidding the purchase of land. At this moment, he thought of the situation in the residence. It would be strange if he was not anxious. After waiting for a long time, the servant was sweating profusely. He hurriedly asked, Sir, I'll have to trouble you to help me look for her. Something big has happened at home. What happened? Why does Feng need to help? At this moment, Ching Chumo's loud voice sounded not far away. When the security guard saw him, his eyes lit up. He hurriedly said, He's Miss Zhang's servant. He said that Zhang Shan's Eason snack shop was blocked early this morning, and there were even officials. That's why he came up the mountain to find the dean. Ching Chumo was half naked at this moment. He wiped his sweat and threw away the bundle of wood on his shoulder. He stared at the servant and sized him up. Is this true? The servant had never seen him before. However, when he saw that he seemed to be able to speak, he hurriedly said, It's absolutely true. This little one does not dare to lie. Was there still any King law? Ching Chumo instantly exploded. He waved his hand and said, Quickly prepare a fast horse. Follow Lao Tzu down the mountain immediately. How dare you cause trouble at Feng Zi's father-in-law's residence? You must be tired of living. Chapter 1478. They were from Zhang Shan's mansion. Of course, they were the guards hired from Chang and University. These people didn't even have time to change their clothes. Of course, they knew where Zhang Shan's mansion was. When Jia Daoren was still alive, he had ordered that no one should care about anything in Chang and city except for 3 places. One was Zhang Feng's mansion, the tavern, and the other was Zhang Feng's father-in-law's mansion. Other than that, no one was allowed to leave Chang and University even if the sky fell down. Today everything was fine. But when they heard that something had happened in Zhang Shan's mansion, how could they bear it? Chang and University had been empty for the past few days, and these people had been bored out of their minds. Besides, they were all from the military and naturally liked to fight. In Chang and city, no fighting was allowed. They had been bored out of their minds for a long time. It was rare that someone had come to make trouble today. It was a good time to beat someone up and not be responsible for it. How could they let it go? And where was this place? This was the mansion of the dean's father-in-law. This was the home of the future wife of Zhang Shan's mansion. How could they take it lightly? At this time, these people didn't say a word. They just stood behind Zhang Shan like wooden statues. However, the appearance of these people had a different meaning for these officials. Now, Zhang Feng was the chancellor and dean of 2 academies. He was also a viscount and the youngest Confucian scholar. Although he was young and didn't have an official position in the imperial court, his identity and status were far beyond them. Because of his identity, they had to salute Zhang Feng when they saw him. They thought that Zhang Feng would be fine on the mountain at this time. That was why they came to have a look. After all, they just came to ask about the phosphate fertilizer. Naturally, Zhang Feng couldn't say anything even if he knew. However, these people were experts who had retired from the military. These people didn't care about that. They were very famous in Chang'an City. Other than Zhang Feng's orders, even if you were the crown prince, you would still have to bend your back. At this time, the few people heard that the old man and the steward of the Zhang mansion were quarreling. These people didn't say anything, so they panicked and could only mind their own business and enjoy the tea. He kept talking about the good tea and so on. Even the benefactor didn't dare to make a sound as he stared at the strong men in White Deer College's guard uniform. On the other hand, the old man, relying on his status as an elder and seeing that these big fools did not speak, became bolder. He coughed and said, "Shanzi, we are all family. Naturally, we should take care of the phosphate fertilizer. Go and tell your son-in-law that we will take over this matter. We will no longer object to his marriage with Yu Yao. Also, I heard that he bought a few hundred square meters of land yesterday. Why does he keep so much land? Coincidentally, our family is so poor that we don't even have enough to eat. Let him give half of the land deed to the old man." The old man? Then why don't you let Fengzi give you the 300 square meters of land and the business of White Deer College? Zhang Shan was so angry that he laughed and asked back. The old man didn't give anything away. He only said earnestly, "Alas. After all, he's still a little young and impatient. Since he doesn't have the time, this old man will help him a little. It's not impossible." His words made the 5 officials grin from ear to ear. It wasn't that they hadn't seen shameless people before, but it was the first time they saw such a shameless person. What kind of place was White Deer College? It was a place that was appointed by the emperor. How dare he covet it? Was this person crazy or stupid? At this moment, the benefactor saw that the guards behind Zhang Shan didn't get angry and didn't say anything. He became bolder and said disdainfully, "Old thing, I gave you some face and you really dared to open a dye house? You know Shanzi's situation better than anyone else. Now you're pretending to be a big shot? That college was appointed by the emperor. Do you think you're fit to take over it? Aren't you King afraid of dying from overeating?" Surnamed Huang, the old man didn't lower himself to your level because of Shanzi's master. Today I'll say it right here. If you want to get any benefits from this place, there's no way. Also, my lords, I'll make the decision regarding the phosphate fertilizer. How much do you want? I'll have that kid Zhang Feng come down the mountain tomorrow and personally deliver it to your residences, such as, "Old thing, you're King tired of living." The guards who had been silent finally couldn't take it anymore. They could criticize anyone, but it wasn't right to criticize the dean's people like that. The purpose of today's visit was to ensure Zhang Shan's safety. As for the phosphate fertilizer and the land, even though these people were causing a ruckus here, they wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. However, they shouldn't have spoken ill of the dean. Seeing this, the old man instantly became like an angry rooster. He pointed at them with his walking stick and said, "Where did these barbarians come from? How dare you interfere in my family's affairs? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror? Aren't you just a dog raised by that bastard Zhang Feng? How dare you bark here?" Zhang Shan couldn't take it anymore. He scolded, "Zhang Shajian, are you done yet?